Good morning. Let me check my sound. Hello. How are you? How's life? Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm rocking the double laptops today. Just checking that everything's working. Just give me 1 second. Okay, this seems to be a good time of day. Holy fuck, my battery on my MacBook is just so shit house. I've got to get it serviced. Anyway, okay. Give me a sec. Let me just close some browsers so I actually have a functioning laptop. Okay. Let me just get my notes up for some of these details that I need. Look at me, all polished and shit. It's almost like I'm not trained in TV or something. It's almost like I know what I'm... Anyway. Oh, because Photoshop's open. Fucking Photoshop beta. Impressive, but power hog. Hang on 1 sec. Let me just remove some of these things from my... Okay, good morning. Obviously I scheduled this ahead of time. There's been a few things that have sort of happened on the Twitter front and Reddit, and, you know, this sort of this shift that where, you know, in order to understand some of this stuff, right, there's lots of moving parts. And it's really interesting actually to see, like, I think this is the nature of complexity in general. Let me just get my chat. Hang on, let me just keep it on. You know, for all of the million people who are chatting, usually people show up, so, but I don't want to miss anyone. I've had a weird, actually, before I get into it, I've had a really weird week, actually. So for those that want to watch this on the replay or whatever, or who are watching now, one of the things, I think there's a misunderstanding. I mean, those who have been around for a while and watched me sort of, you know, get nowhere fast. in my many years of doing the same thing to a handful of people, as much as I appreciate you. And, obviously I'm more, interested in those that are sort of the higher value, sort of that true fans model. I'm not worried about a wide audience per se. But one thing that I have tried to do, and one of, like a life motto, as cliched and self-helpy and, woo as it might sound, one of my main sort of drivers is being the change that I want to see, So I think that that's good advice for anyone, because it's very easy to sit and sort of criticize from the sidelines. Okay, it's very easy. I mean, whether that's politics or policy or, going in and doing something like, streaming on YouTube. What I don't like to comment on things or critique things unless I sort of know the ins and outs. Like, you can't possibly know the ins and outs of everything, right? That's just, if you've got one discipline, it's very difficult to sort of, I just happen to have straddled a couple, and so I see some different moving parts. But part of being the change that you want to see is also sort of being charitable, using, I've talked about, principle of charity and principle of humanity, that sort of approach, which is assuming the best of people, okay, but also making sure that that's not manipulated, or that, you set boundaries, try to be as consistent as possible, but also to live my values, to make sure that, I mean, no one is free of hypocrisy. Like, I can literally contradict myself. I can say I literally, when I watch back my streams, how much I will say one thing, but then the context will shift in my mind, and I will literally say the complete opposite of what I said, but those things are both true because the context has shifted. Because I have ADHD, my contexts shift very quickly, and that can appear to be inconsistent or disorganized. But it's not. If you give me the time to actually sit and sort of flesh out what I'm thinking, my approach is coming from a good place. I try to model certain behavior, okay? And part of that is also, like, especially fucking left-wing dudes, my God. Okay, which is, and also sort of revolutionary lefties in general, okay, which is, it's easy to be revolutionary when you're not actually having to make the changes or implement, or, this is one of those like major critiques of parties like the Greens in Australia, which is that it's very easy to let perfect be the enemy of the good. But it's very, very different to actually implement, to run, to synthesize competing sort of views, like especially in a political climate where, we're dominated by, right-wing Murdoch press and their proxy, which is the ABC, which is the sort of, woke equivalent of the right-wing Murdoch press, right? There's no real sort of critique of those systems. I mean, obviously individually, yes, like obviously individual journalists, but I'm saying, but within a system, this is one of my problems, I think, with, and it will come to tech, because tech is a perfect example of where there are no perfect answers. The nature of complexity, and again, it's not about being complicated, and it's about complex, which are very different things. Complex, the bigger that it gets, okay? So when we're talking about international stuff, okay, like geopolitics or, international law, it's easy to do things at the micro level, okay? When you're this is the same thing with like economics. At the micro level, microeconomics, the firm, okay? Yes, that is the smallest unit, okay? Individually, yes, that person is a makeup of, you can look at the individual, but once you add on another human being, and you've got, like, use the analogy of like, you are a human being and you're easy to understand, okay? You can have a plan for yourself, okay, with a therapist where you work on your shit, your personality at the individual level, okay? You can get a sense of who you are and, how to operate in the world. Then you add on a partner, okay? Or several partners if you want to, but you then have to add on another person. Those things may be in conflict with each other. They may have different preferences or needs or whatever. This is where sort of empathy, it moves outwards, right? And also, like, but then you add in children. Like, I've got three children, one stepchild, and they all have very different personalities. So then, I mean, I often joked that, having three kids is literally like triage, when you're on holidays, which because of, they were all 4 years apart, and my daughter was 8, my son, 4 and 3, 4 and, a baby. That spread means that they all have different needs and wants and desires, and you've got to kind of keep, I used to say that, you can only keep two people happy at any given moment, because I've got the two boys who were sort of 3.5 and a baby, and that, or in this instance, 5 and 1. Then you've got the 8-year-old who's a girl who has different needs. Okay. Then you've got a family of 5. You've got all these other pressures. Then you've got to exist within a neighborhood. And then you've got whole households of different needs. You've got different parenting styles. You've got all that. Then you've got all of these things that operate in external environments. The second that you get to international complex problems, okay, and this is my main point, is that there are no single answers to things, okay? If you are arguing anything even beyond, I think, this is the problem, I think, which is that even there's people who think that, they can run the individual, like their individual worldview, preference, experience extrapolates to bigger society, let alone like one other person. If you've ever been an adult for a length of time, who's lived on your own for a length of time, and like you've had to be on your own, you have your own systems, your own setups, okay, you do things your way, and if you've ever had to then bring in a partner and live together, that takes some time to figure and negotiate and all that sort of stuff. That stuff scales up to government, society, okay, and it often doesn't have any clear answers, because a lot of it is just a negotiation on how to like coexist in this world. And I come from that point of view, which is, we're all doing the best we can for the most part. How do we build systems that sort of, scale up in an impossible situation where it is actually quite impossible to scale these things? But also what I can do at the individual level is model behavior to others that I expect. So it's not unlike, government is not unlike raising kids in a sense, okay? And that's not to be like paternalistic. I'm obviously being simplistic, right? But it is very much like that, which is, I grew up with, like that. Kids know when like a parent's like, don't smoke or don't drink or don't do that. And then you see that parent doing those exact things. Now, that may come from experience. That may come from the fact that they're coughing every day and they don't want their kids to have the life. Like for me, a big part of my driving force with my children is that I don't want them to have, I want to shield them from the mistakes that I've made, okay? I want to shield them from that because I know better, because I've gone through it and I know how it ends, okay? And that's the problem, is that you also, government sort of does that to an extent as well, which is that they've got vast amounts of data and policy, and, this is the positive role of obviously an idealistic role of government, and the sort of pro-benevolent government, right? If you believe in that ideal, which is an ideal, okay, that things largely work. But if you just accept that society is largely managed in a complex environment where there are no ways to win, okay, I had this conversation with I've got a podcast partner. I've got 3 new podcasts coming, and one of those is and he asked me what I thought about our Premier's decision, how he managed the pandemic, and my answer to that is it's tough. He you can't win. And I think a lot of that is just giving the concessions. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have critiques of how these things were managed, or how things could be done better next time. A lot of like government stuff and a lot of this stuff is more about how you can improve, how you can do better. This is why I tend to not be like a revolutionary lefty, mostly because I know and have a deep appreciation for the things that we have actually built, and that we've learned lessons, and that you can take lessons from history and improve them. And I think that it comes back to this idea with tech where, everyone thinks they know the solutions and they think they understand it. But I tend to listen to those who have sort of done the thing, okay? And someone like Jack Dorsey is somebody who I relate to him. Like you'll see when we watch the interview, like I feel for the guy. I always have. Like these guys, they're on this. Well, I'm not diagnosing from afar, obviously, but I would suspect that they're on the the autism spectrum. That has blind spots associated with it. It has strengths associated with it, but obviously, I'm not going to project my own feelings. But I think if you've built a tech product, gone and been in that scene, you empathize with these guys. They're not your usual. Everyone. Again, that's just how you approach things. But also, it's been a weird week because I've had these sort of weird interactions with, and again, part of this is just every so often you attract followers. They're a little too enthusiastic. They're a little too sort of trampling on the boundaries. They sort of think that because you're streaming at them or whatever, that you're like suddenly best friends. And it's like, okay, you got to sort of set some boundaries, right? I have my course coming up on that stuff. Now, again, this contradicts what I said before, which is, I haven't been world famous, but I have managed communities with that are high risk. And I've managed fan communities over the years, and I've managed large communities at sort of the brand level and at the sort of, online community level for years. So I thought I'd like pass on that knowledge. But so I know how, but what I am actually trying to do is show you how you can manage these things and set boundaries. Now, it's not going to be fun. Like I've had these interactions. It's just like these guys will show up, and one of them just landed in my like personal Facebook inbox, and he just started talking at me. Okay, and see, the thing is, I empathize. I give people a little more patience than others because I'm a talker atter. It's why I can carry a 2-hour stream or 3-hour stream or whatever, because I can just fucking keep talking forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Just fucking okay. I get it. However, what happened was I was being sort of polite and I was like, yes, blah blah blah. But then there comes that sort of entitlement. Okay, and I can do this, and it's just friendliness, and I actually do navigate this landscape like really well, which is that confusion that because you're watching somebody and you're watching somebody stream and they're on your screen and that they're engaging with you, that creates a whole different dynamic. That somehow you're on equal footing when someone's doing a live stream or when they're running the community. At the end of the day, still like my space, I can determine how my community runs. But one thing that I do try to do is model the pro-social behaviors that I want to see in the community. And part of that involves setting boundaries and clear boundaries and sort of, hitting someone like that, figuratively speaking, and hitting people and going, the whole whacking on the nose thing. You need to do that from time to time to set an example for those who might be, behaving. And one of the biggest problems we've got with content creation is this parasocial parasocial gone wrong problem, right? That sentence probably didn't come out there. But we've got this problem with parasocial relationships where there is a very big difference between somebody showing up and talking on a camera. Like this does actually require quite a lot of concentration and skill and prep. And, even if you do all of the prep and have a million notes, when the camera's actually firing and you're talking directly to a camera, especially when you don't have like a co-host or someone to reel you back in, you're sort of flying blind. You do have to read chats like at split second. You may misread them, and also don't forget that if you are having someone interact in a chat and they're sort of being a little bit disruptive or sort of, steering the conversation in a way, you've still got to talk to, there's lots of different interests, right? Everything I talk about links, okay? Which is that you're sort of trying to keep multiple groups and multiple people happy at the same time. And just because you're not happy here, it might have a bigger picture, more benefit over here, okay? So in the instance of, say, an obnoxious chatter who wants to argue with me in streams, I'm going to sort of hit them in the head, whack them with a newspaper, figuratively speaking, and, first of all, to set an example. Second of all, I shouldn't wear my watch when I'm streaming because Siri fucking goes off. Okay. Sorry, but so you kind of got to you've got to juggle lots of competing demands at once. And it is very much linked to the Jack Dorsey thing. So, you know, this is just the reality of being in any space, whether big or small, which is that if you're the leader of a community or the leader of a space or, you know, putting yourself out there, you're having to keep multiple things and juggle multiple balls at once. Okay. So with a chatter who's a little, you know, too enthusiastic, with the exception of Mr. Producer Matt, who's fucking awesome and funny and allowed because he's a patron. And and also Matt and I have an established relationship. Okay. We have a friendship. He is a friend of mine. I have, you know, hung out with his wife in person. He's in America, but I'm saying we are friends. Okay. So that you allowed, there's a different boundary there for someone who is known versus someone who's just landing in and acting like, you know, they're sort of crashing a space. This is basic sort of online social skills. And I think that that's the problem is that, again, this is where a lot of this user-centric design and community stuff, sort of, you know, there's some blind spots around how to manage these things. And that's what the course is about, which is how to manage this stuff. And how to steer a community in the right direction. But when you've got someone who just lands in and starts arguing with you, first of all, it's not just about like mansplaining. It's just funny. I say mansplaining because it's funny and it triggers them. But also the word mansplaining is a really good test for whether it's going to get nasty or aggressive. Okay. It's a very good loyalty test or whatever to just get this fucking thing. Because after the last stream, like I've had 3 interactions, okay, from these left-wing guys who just show up. They're my best friend. They love me and everything. They want to talk to me. They want to tell me all about their stuff and their research. And they're like, oh, okay, yes, I get it. I do the same thing. But then when I set a boundary, they just go, all right, then, bye. And they just they start going, I'm not watching you anymore. And I'm like, okay, then, cool. You don't pay me. You're not a client. You're not my family. Okay, then. Off you fuck, you know, that sort of thing. So, but anyway, so, but I think, but also that might be perceived as me being mean to an audience member. It's like, well, no, because I'm also trying to stream to other people. I'm trying to not only interact with the live stream, but I've also got to think about the replay aspect of this stuff, which is, people are going to people fall away from live streams anyway, but because I don't have the resources to edit clips, I've got to think about the replay experience. Okay. I can't cut things out and edit them. So, you know, anything that happens on the chat, I've got to deal with in real time because, you know, it affects the replayability, okay? And also I've had feedback from people who actually give me money, become a patron, okay, which is that, engaging too much with the chat does derail. Like there is a direct relationship between engaging and getting distracted and being dragged into arguments by these guys and the quality of the information that people who pay me are getting, okay? So and this is why, you know, pay to play with chat is a good policy, and people are going to bark about it. They will, you know, that's part of the course. But I'm trying to teach people how, especially because I'm trying, you know, the first course that I'm launching is this, which is how to set boundaries in these things. And it's okay to say no to your audience. Just because you click and watch something doesn't mean you own that creator. That creator owes you nothing. Okay. Unless you are actually paying them. Like one of the biggest it is linked to what I'm talking about, but one of the biggest problems that we've got is this myth. We're having to undo a bunch of sort of bad premises. One of the things that I've really been, I think, focused on lately with the Twitter files, with Reddit, with the API stuff, you know, all of that, is that there's we've sort of been working on some faulty premises, right? And we've made some mistakes. We've discovered some like serious blind spots. And I was at the forefront of that. So anyway, I think it's really funny how there's all these people that can retcon in the internet. When I was there, I was in the room. I know what happened. I know why these things were implemented. And I've talked about that at length, which is that it was a genuine blind spot. Part of it was they didn't want to hear. Part of it is that they just, you know, engineers don't listen to people. They just think that they're fucking gods, okay? But that's a thing with academics and engineers and anyone, you know, who has been elevated in society. They have a tendency, this is the problem, I think, in general, which is they have a tendency to have blind spots, you know, anything that's outside of their their worldview, and that's great. What makes you a great academic and a great PhD and a great engineer and a great surgeon and a great doctor is that you're very, very, very excellent good at focus on that thing. But it's when the Nobel Prize effect, when you wander off lane and you start wandering into shit that you don't know anything about, people start to go, like, I feel encroached upon with a lot of this stuff because there's a lot of people who sort of just say, I understand where they're coming from, but they just say these things as though they are gospel because they happen to have a bigger platform. But I'm somebody who's actually got a wealth of experience. And I know I was literally in some of these sort of government-sponsored incubator rooms with tech. I've, pitched to VCs. I've been not selected. And that there's a reason why, and I've talked at length about why that is, which is if you go back to, when was it? The Wall Street Bets stuff, when I was talking a little bit about the resentment that tech founders have towards the VCs and that simmering, and they're always sort of waiting for an opportunity to sort of make it right. Like, that's something that people, unless you are, in it, it's a lot more complex than just, billionaire bad. It's not that simple when it comes to actually trying to diagnose the problem. Now, obviously, political debate is a hobby for a lot of people, okay? Now, it's a vocation for some, but for others, it's entertainment and all that sort of stuff. Making simplistic, idealistic statements, that's sort of par for the course, okay? Lesson 1, day 1 of political science. Most people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. 101, baseline, first day, most people talk shit and most people just can only bear a headline's worth of information. This was in 1998. This was even before social media. This is a well-known, established fact that apathy is the biggest problem in politics. And, I would argue that I'd prefer apathy than highly engaged stupidity, which is what we've got now. However, day 1, most people can't identify the differences between levels of government, the balance of powers. They don't know if it's in America, they don't know their own constitution. Like, you've got, there's that Andrew Tate did an interview with what's his face, that fucking guy I hate. Who's that idiot sales guy? The Valuetainment, that guy. And he said, America's a Christian nation. It's like, yeah, but are you aware that, like, it's literally in the Constitution that that's not the case? Like, what are you talking about? There's all these things that are just like people just say things and they feel true, so they just say them. And that's fair enough. But, and there's something about, there's something to be said for, there's a role for the sort of the idealist and utopian stuff, right? But at the end of the day, you also then need to go through and actually implement change, and you need to have policy. Now, how does policy succeed and fail? Policy largely succeeds and fails on whether you've identified the problem correctly. So it's called the policy cycle. Okay, it's one of many models, but also in design thinking, when you're designing a tech product, it's not, this software development life cycle. If you're in tech, there's all of these different sort of words for roughly the same process, which is first get all the information, all the data, all of the stuff that you need beforehand in order to form your hypothesis. And in policy, that means clearly identifying what the problem actually is, because there's no point, like in medicine, there's no point, giving someone diabetes medication when they got a heart condition. You need to identify the root cause of a problem before you can fix the problem. And that's foundational to Marx. That's like that's a scientific, again, I'm simplifying for normies, but obviously it's a scientific understanding of like actual conditions, like what actually is, what history tells us, what the lessons are, that process. Okay, you need to clearly identify the problem. And with tech, a lot of people are not identifying the problem correctly because they're just sort of operating it from a place of, ideology for a start, but also, again, this is great. I love the fact that people have different ideas, but those things are toolkits. Ideology, if there's one thing that people can take away from anyone who has sort of worked in a field or in the ground and aren't just sort of talking for a living, okay, and talking about ideas, which again has its place. But for those who are actually in the implementation part of things, or it's like, well, okay, how define that? Okay, why is that a problem? What is the data around that problem? What is the, what's underneath your concern about this problem? Because sometimes, like a lot of this stuff is, it's many layers deep. It's more complex than, it's never about, everybody loves Raymond. It's never about the can opener. Remember that? Sometimes you have to dig a bit deeper to understand what the real problem is. And I think that we need to get more towards, yes, there's internet fucking arguments. Like, that's religious wars. That's going to happen. Okay. I'm concerned primarily with, first of all, getting people to understand and care about, when you've got tech and politics and the law and psychology, they're very dense, okay, and they overlap, but getting people to be interested in one of those topic areas to a level of detail is difficult enough, let alone how they interact. And so, people who are sort of out in the field, and that's not to diminish sort of, the academics or the specialists or, scholars, because obviously they do their part. But the job of the doer or the implementer is to sort of take, in an ideal world, is to take the meta-analysis of all of that stuff and to take the sum of it all and try to sort of, get some solutions out of it. And so the role, and this is why I'm going to, I did it. So Ben Burgess had asked me a question, asked me to clarify, because I did, in retrospect, I probably should have mentioned, I really need to not, so this comes, again, same thing. I'm trying to do multiple things at once, okay? When you tweet, hyperbolic, you're trying to be seen, you're trying to get interaction, you're trying to get engagement, okay? In an ideal world, this is backfired a few times where people can easily misunderstand you, but I understand why, you kind of have to be a little more hyperbolic, or you need to obviously, try to distill stuff into, a tweet. You have to say it in a tone that can't be misread. One of my biggest problems is that obviously I'm Australian, and that's just a learning thing all of the time, which is that learning when you're trying to speak to Americans, you need to be more literal. You need to be you sort of wrap it more in like politeness, and like you can't speak in an Australian voice in your head while you are typing because it comes across as aggressive, and that's something that I forget. But it's also something that I take on because I know that others won't. So I try to, it's like, well, yeah, you got to be willing to be misunderstood and all those things. But anyway, there's always these constant competing forces. And if you're not operating in a place where you've got lots of competing things at once, you're probably not dealing in anything anything remotely complex, okay? Everything, for the most part, has some nuance to it. Okay, I hate that fucking word. I always think of Helen Razor's book where she goes, nuance in her voice. But yeah, but everything has, it depends. Okay, that's what case law is for. That's what the criminal justice system is for. The justice system. Case law, okay, is for, which is to, like, case by case, determine what, based on the body of, in an ideal setting, again, ideals, in an ideal setting, it helps to clarify, and then we form new law, and then we go, okay, yeah, what about this thing? What about this thing? Oh yeah, how about that angle? I hadn't thought of that. It's law. It's like this law in this instance, and this law in a different. If the facts of the case are different, that's how society moves. Now you can critique that process. You can critique accessibility to that process under capitalism. You can critique, but one of the weirdos I had this week was no, kill all lawyers and all of the justice system, PMC. Oh, there's a fucking word that is giving me the shits. PMCs. What does that mean? You just did you learn it's like PMC? Okay, shit lib. They just go around saying slurs like it's a sports thing, and they're just repeating, it's like, I know where this stuff comes from because I watch the same thing as you, but I've got my own thoughts. But to make a thing like that where lawyers who, environmental lawyers or fucking human rights lawyers or even contract lawyers who are sort of, any kind of it's all shit. Let's burn it all to the ground. Let's just fundamentally, it's like, well, this is why I tend to be more reformist. I just don't believe. I think that, violent revolution is inevitable if you can't, like negotiate for, you know, change, and you become sort of you get into a stalemate. But for the most part, okay, you have to show up, and you have to be. It's easy to be a critic from the outside, and it's easy to just, you know, think you know stuff. Okay, and this comes back to Jack, and so Jack was on Breaking Points, and I'm going to show you the whole thing, and I'll just sort of pause it intermittently, okay, as I and comment as we go. I don't normally do react content, but it's, you know, I hate that shit, but okay. Because he did sort of pack a lot of stuff into one interview. But it is very strange because a lot of the stuff, like everyone's got a lot of opinions on tech policy, okay? Everyone's got a lot of opinions on it. Not a lot of solutions and answers, okay? And one of my frustrations is Crystal Ball saying that, you know, Twitter and Facebook and Google should be publicly owned. Now, what does that mean? Define that. I don't want this, you know, something that's owned by the United States, okay? So I got, you know, into that back and forth, and I'm still trying to explain that, which is that it's not incompatible with a socialist critique, because once you go up to a certain level, and with policy, you have to operate within the framework and the environment that you are in. Otherwise, you don't actually achieve anything. Okay, if anything, it's counterintuitive because I mean, sitting around saying burn it to the ground, that's well and good. Smash everything. Great. Okay, cool. Everything's pointless. Cool. And, you know, like I sit there and I had this conversation with Paul yesterday because this whole, you know, the ESG stuff with BlackRock, and they're basically pushing all of this stuff. And every so often I go, well, do I just play along? Do I just say that I've seen the light and do it? Is it futile? Okay. Is it absolutely counterintuitive and futile to sit around saying, well, that's stupid? But in the meantime, you know, I can't like work as a consultant really anymore in corporate because I am a critic of ESG. The ESG stuff is, you know, you know, that's a condition of you getting funded. That's how they get you, right? Talked about this before. It's how they get you. It's the dangling of the carrot, right? But how long can you hold the line for? Not many people hold the line for very long. Okay. But again, this is, you know, it's all going somewhere, which is, you know, this happens to tech founders as much as anybody else. But you've got this ESG stuff, but there is some good in there. Are you going to achieve more by just going, yeah, okay, and turning a blind eye? Most people who go along with the ESG stuff, they don't believe it, but they go along with it because they can trade off little bits of doing some good in the world versus being outside of the system going, and they're also broke. Like I'm fucking, you know, like I'm broke as shit. I am shadow banned to shit. You know, my life is not fun for being a critic of this stuff. There's only like one or two people who can actually do this stuff and actually make a living. And the rest of them are all like being bankrolled by fucking like the far right in the US, and I won't take that kind of money. I'm not that person. So, you know, there is a real cost associated with that. Or, you know, like people romanticize this whole like sitting around like wanting to smash things. It's like, well, that's a luxury thing. I honestly believe that is the most middle class thing that anyone can do, is to sit around and go, well, we should just smash everything up. Because you know what, like that's just, I think that is a luxury belief to have, because there are things that we can do if we, you know, if we organize, and there are practical things that you can do, but you refuse to do them, and you crack the shits, and you want it your way or no way. And I mean, this is just an activist thing. This is just activists. It's how they fucking think. It's single-minded. It's tunnel vision. Perfect is the enemy of the good at all times. The usual shit. Tear it to the ground, okay? It's 1 or 0. There's no shades of grey, even though literally everything outside of a human being, even though human beings are also extremely complex, you know, once you start to scale problems and personalities and needs and requirements and fucking health and all that stuff, once you start to stack everything on top of each other, shit gets very complicated very quickly, and we're doing pretty okay, I think. We're not doing great, okay, because the models aren't quite right, okay? Capitalism, not a fan, you know, but at the same time, you know, regressing to a fucking revolution, again, it depends on your definitions, and people will quibble over definitions, another luxury belief. you know, and obviously, and it's like, well, the only people that benefit from all this quibbling and all this fucking tearing shit to the ground and all that are the right wingers that you're trying to defeat. And it's like, do you know what I do? Is I show up and I refuse to budge. That's my approach, right? I show up, I speak my mind, I pay the price, and I refuse to budge. But I show up and I don't tear shit down. Hello. My husband's dutifully making me coffee. But, you know, like that's the thing, is that you keep trying. And there are, I mean, that's the reality, is that you just keep trying. You don't give up. It's easy to give up. Okay. It's easy to fall into, and I think that that's actually just lazy. If you ask me, I think smashing stuff and being violent, I think it's actually just lazy and entitled. And I think, no, it's like, well, you're forgetting that other people have needs and other people exist. And it's an infant approach to the fucking world, which is that there's people in this world who like the system the way that it is. There's other people in this world who are fine with capitalism. There's people, you've got to coexist with them. And it's like, well, this is why. It's like, well, we've got to figure this out. Now, I know that that's just, you know, people are going to do what people do. Okay. But I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about that, because I think people need to understand where I'm coming from when I defend big tech, especially with, you know, especially someone like Jack Dorsey. And I've talked about this before. I talked about it at length. Fucking what? How many videos did I do on Musk's acquisition of Twitter and everything that was going on there, and how charitable I was? But I think I need to explain where I'm coming from, which is that I am one of these guys, so to speak, but I didn't succeed. I am somebody who understands all of the challenges and pitfalls and the ins and outs of trying to get funded as a startup, okay, and when you've got a product. I'm somebody who works with a lot of these, knows a lot of these guys. They are not greedy. They're not motivated by money. The people who are accusing, I mean, again, a case-by-case basis, right? But those who are, most of these guys are just not as motivated by money as you are. I understand that you're in survival mode and that it's all you can think about. But these guys just aren't, they don't care about money. Money is inconsequential to them because they've got it. It's like air to them. They just don't think about what's in the air. They just, it's there for them. They've got a different purpose. But even like, but the thing about tech guys is that, again, generally, this was, and again, I'm talking about early tech guys. They're sort of post 20, like the crypto bros and those people, they're not utopians at all. They're just like anarcho-capitalists, Ayn Rand fuckwits. They're different kinds of things, okay? Different. I'm talking about those early tech founders who, you know, built these social media platforms and Web 2.0, where I was there. I was working with you know, a bunch of these people. I know some who succeeded. I've drifted away, obviously, and I wish I'd had the money to invest in a couple of them when I had the opportunity before, because I'd be in a lot better position now. I wouldn't be so fucking poor. But I'm also somebody who has been at the periphery of a lot of this stuff and this change, and I'm defending them. I think that they're, you know, it's complex. They're making no perfect decisions, just like being a leader during a global pandemic, and you know, lots of people screaming at you all of the time, and most of those things not being really compatible with each other. I tend to sort of err on the side of people who are showing up, making decisions, doing stuff, rather than, and actually, you know, even if they fuck up, because you're going to fuck up in those situations, versus some people on the internet or some rando or someone who's only got one view on this thing, when there are hundreds of potential different views and hundreds of potential different solutions to things. And they just show up and start like telling everyone else what everyone else wants. And it's like, well, that is inherently, it's inherently authoritarian, but also, it's just not practical. It doesn't work. And so, you know, socialism, capitalism, all of these isms, all of the quibbles, all of those things, they are not religions, okay? They are not laws. They are not anything. They are tools in which to assess the world and to help you assess and diagnose problems in which to find solutions. And like, if you don't, I happen to be a socialist because I believe that socialist policies work better. They are better policies. However, you can't just go and, impose policies in a democracy, in a pluralist society, on people who don't want that. They have rights too. You need to live your values. You need to show that you mean it. You need to persuade people. And this is the thing about, this is my beef with fucking tribal like politics in general, which is, first of all, all the time you spend fucking talking on Twitter, you could be reading the shit. I only talk on there because I've already read the shit. And the only reason that I'm on there is because it's my job to understand this specific problem and talk about this specific problem. Otherwise, I wouldn't fucking bother. I'd be doing something else. I'd be working on the ground in social policy, or, doing something else, being a lawyer, okay, all that sort of stuff. But, reading more is good, generally, okay? Arguing on the internet about politics is just not going to go very well. Like, even just trying to, before I came on this stream, I had a brief interaction with Ben Burgess, and I'd like to expand on it but the nature of Twitter is that, I said a thing, I'm trying to entertain, and it was a moment in time, and, I keep forgetting that, the @ symbol is a fuck around, find out symbol, and you forget that I always forget, because it's the way that I've always used Twitter, which is that it's like a head in the jar, and I forget people read it, and I forget people can see it, and I forget people will reply to you. I forget because I use the internet like the old internet, which is my secrets. I wanted to keep a secret, so I put it on the internet. I'm just living in my head. Okay. I use it as a sort of scratch pad for random thoughts, and then I @ people. There's no real intention behind that. Like, as a, if I wanted to do a marketing strategy, this would be the opposite, because I don't like that chicken hawking stuff, right? I think it's fucking toxic. But, anyway. But, I even just trying to explain your point of view, it's like you look crazy because it's like walls of text. Like, in that instance, I took the time to try and hurriedly respond and say it. But it's it's not a good way. It's not politics, is what I'm saying. It's not fucking politics. Anyway, so I'll put this thing on, okay, and we'll go through bit by bit. Now, hopefully, there's no feedback. It should be okay. Let's have a look. Let's hope. I've got to fix my keys.
I don't think that builds trust, and right now we need to build as much trust as possible, open up and be as transparent as possible, and really let the people see and decide for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Jack, speaking of openness, of transparency so far, we haven't had a chance to really hear from you much in really the recent years, and especially the last several months. What do you make so far of Elon Musk's CEO takeover of Twitter, your former company?
I think this is actually the first interview I've done since I left the company, maybe longer. Well, as I've said, Twitter was going to have a very, very hard time continuing to be a public company. It had many pressures upon it. The advertising business we were entirely dependent upon, and not just advertising as you might think of it from Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. It was
Hello, Matt. Hello, Matthew.
Brand advertising. It was dependent upon huge brands or a collection or conglomerates of brands seeing us as something that they wanted to spend money on. And because we were so small relative to our peers, if anything happened in the market or with them, they would instantly pull away from us. Snapchat was included in that bucket as well. And they would retreat to the larger ones like Facebook and Google.
Okay, so this is important, right? So, again, because I know from the sort of the agency perspective and corporate marketing and stuff, right? A lot of because this is where dealing with bad actors and propagandists on social media in general is probably the why I see it as the biggest. I mean, we're going to have that. People are going to just make stuff up to get their clout or to get clicks and to get paid. But what you want to do is remove some of the incentives to do so. Like the institutions should not be rewarding this kind of behavior, right? This is where a robust system where people could actually, sue for defamation without it, killing them, okay, or making people. And this is what, I like community notes for this reason as well, even though that's fucking gamed as well. I could talk about that another time. But one of the, sorry, just one second. I'm just going to acknowledge producer Matt, my favorite person. Hi, Matt. Hi, Beck. Hi, all the people. I'll just go, thank you. Hello. So basically, in the early days, like there was this space race, but there was this whole, what started as, was especially with like Facebook, it was very much geared towards small business having access. So Google really started out, and Facebook started out with sort of small businesses being able to advertise for a small amount of money. It was a lot cheaper, okay, technically, than, billboards or TV or radio or anything like that. So there was this sort of divide between internet advertising and there was a perception that was cheaper, which it isn't, but there was a perception that it was cheaper, that it was more accessible, that it democratized advertising, particularly ad buys. Okay, so ordinarily when you went through, when you wanted to run an ad in the early days, if you had a small business, I remember this actually. This is how long, which is that I looked at the yellow pages. Okay, here, and this was in the early days before sort of AdWords. Oh, well, actually, no, it wasn't before AdWords. It was about around that time. Anyway, doesn't matter. Details don't matter. But it was like $10,000 or something to just get a listing in the yellow pages. Okay. And you would remember that. This is actually a funny thing. I use this as an example in an SEO course that I used to teach, which was the AAAAAAA, so that they would try to get up to the top. The AAA, that's like, that's kind of how black hat SEO works today, which is ultimately you still have to read all of those fucking A's. Like it's a waste. It's just, if it was just working, the way that it should, nobody would have to put, all the A's and stuff. But anyway, basically that became a way for companies to spend a lot less than $10,000 on ads. Okay. So rather than having to do a campaign like, a year, every year, spending like 10, 20, sometimes $50,000 a year on a listing in the yellow pages, or a newspaper ad or a radio commercial, those things are quite expensive. What it did was allow for you for about, $3-5, right? Boost your organic reach right now. So I'm doing another course on the earned media aspect of marketing, and talking about how that's changed. So I'll gloss over that. But basically with Twitter, the value proposition for Google was because people had search terms. Okay, so if people were searching for, so in that user journey, which I've talked about before, if people are searching for X keyword, you'd have non-intrusive, originally, theoretically, non-intrusive paid ads that, would be relevant for your keyword search. So if you're looking for shoes, it would show you, shoes ads in that thing based on, and it got more sophisticated. So basically the original sort of, AdWords was basic demographic stuff, like you're in Perth, you are searching these terms, they maybe you're male or female. Also, sorry, my voice just crackled then. I need to start doing voice exercises. If anyone can recommend some like voice training, if you're professional and you know how, like for people who speak and you can help me out, recommend a program, that would be good. Again, you can't Google anything anymore because I always look now on the third page of Google for things, which is ironic, right? Because I just assume that it's all like, anyway, side point. You can't even ask, that's the thing, is that it actually made it so garbage over the years that now, so that's what, okay, it's linked to what I was talking about. So let's say that I'm searching for voice techniques, okay? In the early days, you would just search for voice techniques and there'd be like maybe 2 or 3 ads, and then you'd have your organic content. Now people would, invest in that organic content. So basically the trade-off, I used to consider AdWords and advertising like a trade-off between I've got a graph that's basically the more boring that your content is, the more you're going to have to pay to get people to click on it, right? It's like there's a relationship there, okay? And that was the way that I sort of explained it, like it's the boring tax, right? So like obviously, so the less relevant, the less interesting your actual content is. You should be content first, organic, interesting, compelling, creative, always beats massive budgets, okay? So the thing that advertising did in digital marketing, there was a brief window of a few years where I would be consulting on that guerrilla kind of marketing, where you could get a lot of earned media. If you were creative enough and you had really good creative, you could save a lot of money on having to boost and pay, because it would, let people sort of, you could leverage that sort of virality to get sort of free advertising, right? No advertising is free, but over time, and Twitter, obviously, because Facebook had access, so Google had access to search data, okay? Facebook had access to behavioral data. I'm simplifying, but I'm saying like Facebook had access to more and more interactions, okay? So instead of it just being you're in Perth and you're searching for shoes like Google, and they had to extrapolate sort of your behavioral stuff, okay? That's not the case now, but I'm saying this was before Google owned all of the shit in the early days.
A company without any protection.
But Facebook had the
We had
edge.
no dual class,
Sorry, hang on. Oops, accidentally.
voting setup.
But Facebook had the edge in behavioral stuff because they were like measuring behavior from the get-go, and that was their model, okay? Google was having to guess. Now, again, I'm really like, there's a lot of like yes and buts in this, okay? But I'm just trying to get to the point. But generally, this is where Twitter fell sort of in the gaps, okay? So LinkedIn ads are actually more expensive than other ways of advertising, because LinkedIn actually has a a primed audience of business users, B2B marketing. If you do really well, like organic marketing on LinkedIn is so fucking easy. It's so easy, but you just, you got to have the right thing to sell. But I'm saying like a LinkedIn strategy is still, it's one of the few platforms where an organic strategy works. TikTok is also organic, right? For now, that's changing, but over time these things get sort of compromised. But that is the sort of conundrum that we've got, which is that users won't pay for the product, but the product is expensive to run. And like advertising is really the only model other than subscriptions that it makes the business viable. Like there's not going to be, like most people, so with an ad, I'm jumping forward, but let me just, for the sake of completeness, just say that so Google was about search terms, eventually had, eventually they had behavioral stuff, but, let's move on. Facebook was largely behavioral. Okay. So they kind of had, because they had access to what you liked. And I've talked about that before, how, you can tell a lot about a person behaviorally by the things that the groups they join and the things that they're a fan of and the communities they participate in. There's more like insight into their actual motivations as a human being. That makes that powerful, like for ad targeting, right? But Twitter, obviously it was a different beast, because first of all, like I remember trying, every time we would do like an audience analysis or sentiment analysis or anything like that with the early enterprise tool was Radian 6. That tool was acquired by Salesforce. And that this was 2010 was when I first started using Radian 6. And the only thing that they would really have was basic sort of sentiment analysis. So you could see who your followers were, who was mentioning you, like your gender, and the way that they said gender, because you didn't actually tell Twitter what your gender was, whereas Facebook, remember how it was like it's your relationship status, you fucking thing, your life events, you were just feeding it all into there. You were feeding that beast, okay? Whereas Twitter, you only had your bio, your tweets, you have those basic sorts of things, right? They didn't have gender or anything like that. So what they would do is guess your gender based on the tone that you use, but, using like sentiment analysis, okay? So with Twitter from the get-go, advertising was always a bit more of a struggle, which is to address what Jack said. Advertising was more of a struggle. Their biggest mistake, and I've talked about this before, was not going more direct in terms of making the product like boost, or like the way that Twitter Blue operates now. There was you could have they tried to implement various alternatives, but unfortunately, come 2013, the advertising agencies and the PMCs sort of took over all of the the corporate interests always took over. Like those, I've talked about that before, where those ad agencies just completely just stole all of the IP, just ran with it. They finally figured out how to do digital, and they just Accenture was a big one. The big ad agencies like Leo Burnett and Ogilvy and all those sorts of advertising agencies. They went from media buys, like billboards and TV and all that sort of stuff. They spent like a year or two just really fucking up and sort of, making mistakes and stealing IP from people like me, thought leaders like me at the time, and learning as they go. I'm going to do a thing on this as part of that course, but like a lot more structured than this. These streams form the riffing for the course. So anyway, but basically those ad agencies just took over and started like calling the shots because they had unlimited money. They could just start like bribing these tech and Twitter, because it was struggling to monetize at the time, and they didn't have sort of that behavioral. So the value proposition for a small business to advertise on Twitter wasn't as strong as it was for, say, Google and Facebook, right? Because the value proposition for a small business to advertise on Google or Facebook or LinkedIn was stronger because they got more bang for their buck. Whereas on Twitter, first of all, because of the nature of Twitter, because Twitter was, unpredictable, beautifully unpredictable, chaotic, all of those sorts of things. There was a risk there with corporations. Okay, so only those corporations that really wanted to go hard with, the kind of, risk of corporations by nature are risk averse, but small business in particular, there's a lot riding on a fuck up. So basically through, about 5 years of trial and error, I think a lot of small businesses really just started to become skittish when it came to something like Twitter. I've always advocated for just showing up and participating, and Twitter is still like great for that, assuming that you can get, reach and all that sort of stuff. Just give me 1 second, Matt. You're covering me head. Hang on. Let me move my head. There we go. Look, Matt's talking over me. Fucking typical men in tech. Fucking woman's talking, cover up her face. Kidding. Hang on, let me look at your 99% of serial killers follow your tweets. Yeah, side note, that beard is definitely a beard. I love it. He's so unkempt. Anyway, oh, yes. Yes. So typical fucking men's. Exactly. Fucking typical. But anyway, so I love you men's. I love how it's like I can anyway. Stop thinking that everything is black and white. It fucking annoys me. And also learn to take a joke and stop being so literal. Or not you, Matt, but everyone. Like I can say Americans are stupid and still love America. I can still say I fucking fuck America and love America and love Americans and all that shit. I can still, you are not the one thing that you say. You are multiple different things, many shades of grey. There is no one view. There are lots of different views. Life is way more fun if you have the ability to just jump out of your skin and try to empathize with others and see where people are coming from. I think that a life where you only see things in a linear way and this is your box, that sounds like a fucking shitty life to me. Imagine just being like someone who just buys. Imagine going. Do you know what I find really fascinating? This is like linked to my entry point with the gender critical debate. The gender debate, more like the gender shit fight that is pointless, is that like how many people are still in this like and this anti-SJW, anti-woke bullshit and all those things. It's like how people are just, they haven't moved forward. They stay still in like, and it's like, do you know how many things and how many different ideas and all those fucking conversations and how much like I've changed in like 5 years since I became exposed to this thing. There's people who are still just moving in the same fucking circles, the same thing, saying the same words. They just keep going, far left, far left, far right, PMC, shit lib. It's like, you need to bring something more to the table than just like, yeah. And it's just like, no, but this whole like this revival of anti-SJW shit, it's like if you're using that fucking, you know, screaming lady with the glasses, and if you're using that meme in like it's pathetic. It shows the fact that you haven't evolved in any way. People can change and evolve, and the fact that people aren't curious, like I can't imagine anything worse than being the same person that I was 3 days ago. Like I'm always, every single day, I try to be incrementally different or better or try something new every single day. I cannot imagine being somebody who is the same as they were 3 years ago. It's insane. Like that is so dull. And if you think that people are like that, you're one of them. Because you don't live a life, you don't take any risks, and you don't do anything. People who do things, and people who live in the trenches, and people who actually participate understand that things are more complicated than that. Okay, so anyway, let me just crop. My head's cropping. Hang on. Let me fix this and hang on. Let me just fix this. It's annoying me. There we go. Bit better. So let's go on. So, but the thing about Twitter is that it's always struggled with the advertising thing, and any advertising that they did get, it was usually coming from corporations, big corporations, okay, especially things like car companies, tech companies, big food. So Nestle is actually in 2020, Nestle actually was and Unilever, and I think it was Nestle, Unilever, and like these big food, GlaxoSmithKline, those companies were actually the biggest advertisers on Twitter, mostly because they felt, I'm reverse engineering their strategy, but obviously because they sell a lot of food and they're sort of dealing with people who are just in the moment and they're out, or they're in the queue or whatever, that they're out and they're you're catching them where they're at, which is, you know, oh, I could do with a burger. Oh, I could do with that. Oh, that's, you know, so I can see how when they did their experience mapping that, you know, food and those impulse buys are going to be more appealing for Twitter. So a lot of advertising is about trying to reverse engineer and figure out where people are at and market to them. So a Twitter audience is obviously going to be more about junk food and impulses and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I can understand how strategically that would make sense. Also, you know, car companies and stuff like that, mostly because you had, you know, media people. So you had, you know, celebrities and, you know, so it represented a certain type of user that would draw and attract a certain type of advertiser. And it sort of bypassed a lot of that sort of small business, micro-targeting, that kind of model that Facebook did. Like a lot of people like myself who were sort of advertising or, you know, marketing on Twitter were largely dealing with organic, because we just ran with what we thought was funny. And we thought, you know, so we brought the audience to ourselves without barely trying. Whereas, you know, anyway, it's a whole other fucking thing. I've wandered off into a tangent. So, but Twitter was always at the mercy of that, because 89% of their revenue was advertising. Okay, they were never able to find a product outside of that and data licensing. Okay, which is a vague term, but so basically, you know, API licenses, you know, at the enterprise level, and you know, yes, all of that data stuff. Okay, data licensing. Okay, very vague, very shitty, very sinister. In 2020, when he launched, was it 2020? 2020 when he launched, or 21, when he launched Twitter Blue first, okay, they were trying to move away from the advertisers. So they were actually trying to get people to go, well, will they pay for perks? People come to Twitter for news. Okay, let's give them news. Okay. I mean, I think their mistake was not giving blue checks straight up and support. I mean, the way that Meta Verified have done it is that they give you like actual access to support, and you know, there's different perks there. I think that they just never really managed to get figure this out. Okay. And that's the problem, is that they just became owned by advertisers. It's not even so much about like being owned by, the government, the US government, which is one and the same with massive corporations. Like they're effectively an oligarchy, right? So they are one and the same. So I find it funny where there's this false choice between a public and private ownership of tech. It's like they are the same thing. They're different. They're no different. They fuck the world no matter what. All right. So it's just anyway. But anyway, let's move on. But you need to understand that what was unique about Twitter was that because you couldn't micro-target people, you could only do advertising based on followers. Okay, so who the followers were, but you don't have that much didn't have all that much information on users in the early days. Obviously, as they started to vacuum up data into Salesforce and shit, then obviously they could follow you across platform. But for the most part, this data was siloed. So eBay, eBay only have what you buy and that data there, but they don't necessarily share it with Google. Okay, I think this is where people don't understand how siloed some of this data is at the tech company level. So eBay actually do contain their data. Matt can probably verify that it's done elsewhere that way at another major tech company, that it's done that the way that they do this is that, even within the company themselves, that data is siloed to only do your job. So if you're shopping on eBay or shopping on Amazon or whatever, the way that data is handled is not necessarily as sophisticated as you'd think. But it's those who vacuumed up that data and it's stored elsewhere that is actually the problem. The actual day-to-day operations with data with those companies are not terribly, they're still kind of just dealing with analytics at the end of the day, and it's not terribly sophisticated. But Twitter didn't have access to as much data as everybody else. So the advertising experience wasn't great, which meant that they drew in advertisers who were sort of large-scale, broad brand awareness advertisers that were okay with being seen with, they wanted to be seen alongside journalists and alongside the newspapers and alongside all the politicians and all that sort of stuff, that elite part of society who were hanging out on Twitter. They weren't necessarily doing big FM, that big fast, their strategies were not necessarily they were different. Anyway, something policy. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it depends. I tell you what, I'm sure this isn't breaking the NDA or anything, but I did quite a lot of work with eBay. Okay, and when we first started doing a lot of their work, I did a lot of SEO work actually with eBay and some product implementing sort of a new CMS, like the global CMS and stuff like that. So quite a big complex project. So it was actually really interesting because I was surprised how underutilized a lot of the insights were. Okay, and that's not that's just I think we assume too much of even just banks or whatever. That's why you can't be with the conspiracy theories. If you've actually worked in these kinds of spaces, it's actually impossible to fucking, because everything, everyone's still just operating on PowerPoint documents and they're not really doing anything because there's still people at the end of the day. But anyways, so I do have some insight into things that we things that we were, hang on, I missed that chat. Hang on, one sec. Things that you would think, trying to access certain data that I assumed that they had access to because I was like, oh, let's do this campaign and let's do this and this and this. Things that you would assume they had access to was actually really, really challenging, and they couldn't get it because first of all, some of it was locked down. But I think you'd be surprised how ethical some of the use of data in those companies themselves is, the way that they use that stuff. Okay, so give me 1 second. Okay, hang on. Put my head over Jack's. Obviously, some are going through here, but not here. I don't know what the fuck. I didn't see what it was. Anyway, okay, doesn't matter. Let's assume that okay, because I saw you saying something. I wasn't sure if you were responding to someone else that I can't see. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was actually really educational for me, because I just assumed that because, and it's the same thing with government and any other sort of, I've worked on a wide range from small business sort of up to like that scale, right? That it's, I think you'd be surprised that the companies themselves actually handle the data really well, and they're actually quite limited. They do actually, they behave themselves quite well. It is the sort of the third parties and the people who buy that data and the sort of, like I said, that what's it called? Data licensing. People that were sort of, up the back, they were sort of sneaking and just vacuuming up. Like I talked about that with Cambridge Analytica and those sorts of things before. Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, so frankly, Taya knows this stuff back to front. Referring to me is partly mutual respect and partly, hey, he can back me up as a fellow human. Yeah, exactly. And it's also just because you're also in tech and, sometimes you got to attach yourself and you need that. Also, remember, don't forget, I'm sitting here talking in a room to myself and anyway. You keep me sane. But you also, I haven't actually been in that corporate setting for a few years now. It may have, I'm sure it's gotten better, but I do know from my own experiences and also having built tech and worked with tech and built off the top of these things and all the things that we've done, that it's not as sophisticated as you think. Okay, it really isn't as sophisticated as you'd think. But where Twitter fell down was obviously the fact that they couldn't monetize the data as much because there wasn't much of it. It wasn't behavioral. All they could do was focus on the tweet and what you said. So a lot of it was just sentiment analysis. There wasn't really much else. Okay. Yeah, mate. Yeah, exactly. You know. Now you're all, I just accidentally swallowed ice. So I may well get I just accidentally got a thing of ice that's about to jump down in. Okay, let's just wait and see if I get that fucking headache. So anyway, but yeah, so let's just keep going with this. So that was, I think it's really, I need to emphasize that what Jack is saying is correct here, because, and I think people just gloss over a lot of the details of this because they think that Twitter somehow fucked up, but they didn't. They actually did the right thing, which is that they didn't actually gather much data. They built it on trust. They built it on, it was kind of an accident in many respects. It was a lot less designed than in the early days, a lot less sort of designed than Facebook or Google, okay? But the reason why Twitter struggled to monetize is because they didn't have the primary product that the others had, which was that behavioral data. So 89% was still just advertising, and massive amounts of the advertising were big brands, okay? Like I said, big food, okay, who I've said before and alluded to before are heavily invested in this sort of woke shit because they get to sell, junk food. I've seen what they've done, what they try to push this idea of like, McDonald's and Coca-Cola exist as part of a healthy diet, stuff to dietitians all the time. They fund research. It's the same, as a story as old as time. It's the same shit, different fucking thing. And, obviously pushing the body positivity and the fat phobia stuff comes from there. So they obviously have a corporate interest and a brand interest in people not saying that's junk food, that's bad for you, you shouldn't eat that. Okay. So sentiment around that is really important. So that's why it's just, you use some idiot who thinks everything's fucking, everything's fat phobic, and you see how they go, oh yeah, let's just promote that person or work with that person. We get to turn it into an ideology. It's win-win for the content creator, and there's branded content that's not declared, and you see how that's sliced. So Nestle, Unilever, biggest advertisers on Twitter. Car companies, obviously, when the owner of Tesla takes over Twitter, they're going to be fucking, they're going to not want to advertise on Tesla's platform, are they? Okay, that's obvious. Okay, so that was a big part of it. But also then, because of a lot of the people who were, if anything, the exodus from advertisers was an indication of like what the makeup of the advertisers on Twitter were, which is they were big food, military industrial complex, fucking media, and they were working with these media and journalists and getting favors and sort of massaging everything so that they could sell shit. Could sell junk food, they could sell poison, they could sell war, they could, all this sort of stuff. That's what this woke shit is. It's all it is. It's just this this ESG stuff that I've talked about before, where they completely ignore class, completely ignore anything. It's just marketing. Okay, it's just I've said this for years. It's just marketing. Okay, and whether it's declared or not is dependent on how unethical it is. Okay, so obviously pharma are not going to do there's the stuff that we know about and the stuff that I think is a dark campaign, such as such as when this fucking obvious influence campaign around gender affirming care for children, that there's a conflict of interest there. Okay, this is how you can go, well, there's no conspiracy, it's just a phenomena that's based on capitalism and conflict of interest and stuff. Now, Matt's being a smart ass because Matt reads a lot of news that he shouldn't be reading and believes things, which is, remember when Twitter had advertisers? They actually do now. A lot of them have come back, and but I actually think that it's to misunderstand the strategy, if I'm honest with you, with Twitter, which was that they were the people, the advertisers were the ones that had Twitter in the state that it was in, which was this never-ending fucking culture war, this never-ending war between fat phobia and reactionaries on the right, all of that sort of stuff. And a lot of that toxicity on the platform was being driven by the large advertisers, okay? And that was because of this idea with advertising and marketing that you could do PC versus Mac, Apple versus Samsung. This whole polarization approach to marketing. That's one of that's core of the course that I'm doing, which is trying to reach marketers and say you can't do that anymore. This has actual consequences. You need to rethink your strategy. Okay. I know you are just being funny. That's why but also it's an opportunity to explain that, right? It's to explain that is important, which is to say, well, the advertisers actually, because what you'll notice is if you pay attention to anything, this is why just looking at one thing and just regurgitating media, I'm not saying you did that, Matt, I'm saying in general. I'm arguing with a giant lefty fucking straw man of super online fucking people with a, stereotype of a fucking revolutionary couch surfer, okay, who only reads fucking, who only watches Jimmy Dore and that sort of shit, right? And again, I'm not dismissing Jimmy Dore. I'm saying Jimmy Dore's the comic, and I'm saying that's like you can watch everyone. You don't have to watch if you're only watching one person, okay, and you're just regurgitating that thinking as a service thing. You're going to miss the part that if you're paying attention, which was that Twitter actually just was the first one. So they were the first to do the layoffs, the first to sort of put in the verification. They were the first to do this thing. And then over time, because there was an overall contraction in ad spend anyway, because of that ad fraud stuff that I was talking about. So what it did was it just provided cover and like moving away and away, like sort of, there was a contraction of ad spend anyway because we were heading for a recession, but also things were about this click fraud, the fraudulent websites. Like I've talked about before, that $120 billion US in ad fraud in 1 year alone, that where people were just like siphoning money away from AdWords. So they were just, that clickbait model was dying, and that's why BuzzFeed and those organizations were the first to go, because they were basically just like falsifying their followers by fake followers, fake bots, fake traffic, astroturfing everything, and advertisers were footing the bill for all of it. Okay, so their whole business model was built on a scam. It's basically like MLM. Okay, so again, a lot of people benefit from that approach. But the problem is that it was shrinking. But Twitter, and so there was an overall contraction of the online ad industry. But that's because there was more accountability over this side that was closing in. Twitter had to get rid of that shit. So but the way that it's obviously like those that are in this fucking ecosystem, they're going to rewrite things. They're going to make it so that they go, oh well, Elon Musk, he lost his advertisers. It's like, well, no, you have a conflict of interest. Who pays your bills? Oh, is it the advertisers? Is it the like Nestle and Unilever and all of those other people that they pay your bills because you're calling everyone a fat phobe? Do you see how this works? It's like that's your conflict of interest, okay? So for example, okay, same thing with like Pink News. Pink News makes money like promoting certain fucking narratives. That's how they make their money. If you look at who funds these organizations, right? Yeah, and like this click fraud is absolutely fucking like, but it's been closing in. So it's been so. But it's funny because if you understand how the industry works, you'll go, yeah, of course, fucking Gizmodo and Kotaku and shit are going to say Elon Musk did it, when we know Kotaku inflates their fucking followers and they've been scamming advertisers. You should thank your lucky stars that you're not in prison because you've ripped fucking millions and millions and millions of dollars from like major corporations. You better fucking have your books in order. And this is part of the thing where they go, oh no, it's because Elon Musk bought Twitter. That's why. It's not because we've been doing clickbait, calling everyone a fat phobic fucking whatever on behalf of Nestle because they're an advertiser on our website. No, not that. And again, this isn't conscious. This is about how things operate at the subconscious level in terms of human interest and, you know, what those conflicts are. You just got to, again, there's no, this is where the literal minded fuckheads are like, well, where's your evidence of that? I'm like, well, psychology and capitalism and what I know about the ad industry, it's not difficult to fucking reverse engineer if you're a moderately intelligent human being. Which is, and also that if you can spot fake traffic and inflated likes and all that sort of stuff, it's fucking obvious. I would do it. Like I've said before, I'd make it fucking fortune if I had no scruples, but I do. And also because I know that it will eventually get caught because these things have a tendency to, but we've had a Wild West time. What I'm saying is there's been a period of time where there was a fucking grift and a loophole, and those loopholes are slowly closing. So that's linked to the API. It's linked to, you know, some of those blind spots. There's a correction happening in tech around that model. So what Jack was basically saying here is that there, you know, because Twitter didn't have, as much behavioral data, obviously they were more dependent on advertisers than others. They were dependent on the big advertisers, and they were the advertisers who were able to do brand awareness campaigns. Now, those that can do brand awareness campaigns are those with the biggest budgets. Like most small businesses will be offering a coupon or a sale or, you know, something like that. They need to have a direct relationship between what they spend and what they make back from it. Like that's, you know, whereas, you know, companies like Nestle and Unilever and, you know, those big ass companies, and Pfizer was a big Twitter, you can understand why Pfizer withdrew, right? But Pfizer were a big sponsor on Twitter. I mean, you could see why Pfizer might have if they're spending billions of dollars on ads on Twitter, might be able to make a call and say, ban all the people that criticize this thing because it's hate speech, when it's not. I mean, we've got documented evidence. It's not a leap to go, ban those gender critical feminists. We're trying to, you know, again, not an actual conversation, but what you do is you manufacture through Pink News and through these useful idiots, you manufacture these stories that J.K. Rowling is transphobic and that there's all this. You fund research from idiots, from like whatever, useful idiots who need a grant at a sociology department who talk about the rise of the far right online and how fucking memes are like Nazi shit, and you fund all that bullshit research. And then what you do is you then use that and you launder that stuff, and then you go to Twitter and you say, look, here's all the evidence. This is hate speech. These gender critical feminists need to go. They're far right Nazis. And then you got a whole bunch of stupid people going, anyone who critiques is a fucking TERF. You see how this stuff works. It's like, well, no. No, Big Tobacco did that. That's what Big Tobacco did. That's what they've all done, is do that to critics. And it's like, that's pretty obvious what that is, but you're at the mercy of that when you are, like he actually said, that you are at the mercy of advertisers. Okay. So, and this is the interesting thing where, anyway, let's just,
We were open to activists coming in. In fact, we had an activist coming into our stock. It's hugely distracting. And really, really challenging to build anything at all, and to actually build something that.
Actually, let me go back. Okay.
Was included in that bucket as well. It was brand advertising. It was dependent upon huge brands or a collection or conglomerates of brands seeing us as something that they wanted to spend money on.
See what I said about, so it was brand advertising? That's different from general marketing, like, you know.
And because we were so small relative to our peers, if anything happened in the market or with them, they would instantly pull away from us.
I'll do a deep fake of me as Jack with a beard when I have a computer that will run anything.
Snapchat was included in that bucket as well. and it would retreat to the larger ones like Facebook and Google.
You see why?
Because we were a public company without any protections, we had no dual class voting setup. We were open to activists coming in. In fact, we had an activist coming into our stock. It's hugely distracting and really, really challenging to build anything at all, and to actually build something that you have to take some risk upon, because you have the pressure from these advertisers and all this revenue suddenly going away if you make a decision they don't like.
Right.
And at the same time, if that happens, then the stock has an issue and activist comes in and it's a death spiral. So the only path to me was to take the company private. And Elon is our number one user. He's our number one customer. He understood the platform deeply, and he's a technologist and he builds technology. So
I find it interesting that he said that Elon Musk was his number one customer, which is that, a lot of Tesla's marketing strategy has been around building hype around, Tesla on Twitter. So, Twitter and Tesla do have that symbiosis that I find really interesting. But a lot of his stuff has been somewhat organic. Like, yes, they do obviously spend a lot of money on advertising. But I found it very interesting because I actually went to confirm and verify whether Tesla actually literally spend like a lot of money on Twitter ads, and they don't actually spend that much. Most of their investment is actually in organic reach, right? So I just thought that was really interesting.
At the very start, I was hoping for years that he would, and I asked him many times to join our board at least. But when he decided to make a bid for the company, or join the board and then make a bid for the company, I was, it felt great. But as you all remember, that's the time when the market crashed, especially for advertising companies like ours. So if we
Sure.
not get that,
The market crashed, especially for advertising companies. It's a bit of a gloss over there. So but also what happened was that there was this on the other side, like I've talked about this in previous streams, where there was starting to be greater scrutiny on click fraud, ad fraud, like the actual industry-wide corruption, like even the IAB, like being corrupt around this stuff. I've covered that before. So that was all happening. So this was all closing in on this other side. So, but they also, again, corporations going to cooperate. They use that as an opportunity to sort of, control the narrative around this stuff and not say, hey, all these publications are ripping us off for millions. I imagine there's going to be some lawsuits coming. But you saw, like Vice, I think it was a Vice or Vox? Vice or Vox, I always get those two confused, had to close the doors, okay? BuzzFeed's gone. And a lot of these, what you'll see in the last little bit, what you'll see in this last little 6 months or so is this all closing in on these websites that were basically creating narratives that were basically just undeclared, undisclosed, branded content, sponsored content. Okay, it was Vice, yeah. But that's really interesting because Vice is also, I think, a Murdoch property, if I'm not mistaken. So, but you've also got this other stuff around Murdoch's war with these things as well, because Murdoch is really fucking at war behind the scenes with the internet as well. So the motivations for this culture war stuff with the right being anti-big tech is not even necessary, and Fox News being anti-big tech is not even necessarily about them caring about big tech. It's actually, or about like freedom of speech. It's about the fact that Murdoch wants them, as their competitor, okay? And also with Tucker Carlson sort of leaving and switching, there's all these sort of levers being moved in behind the scenes, right? And so it's not all is not what it appears. It's not about whether it's, I said this to Ben Burgess, actually, which is I tend to be more in the, this is the invisible hand at work more than anything, which is that they tend to be stumbling on the right thing rather than actually doing the right thing through their greed, right? Sorry, there's a door. Paul? Yeah, I'm on stream. Hang on. Paul? Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. It's all right. Sorry, the doorbell went. I think that's the thing you sent me, Matt. It's Matt's fault. Package is here. I think. Anyway, no, but so it's not, all is not what it appears, which is that, anyway, I fucking got derailed. Where was I? There was a doorbell. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So basically, you need to understand the levers that were moving behind all of this, where he goes, there was a recession, it was like a market crash. And it's like, well, yeah, there was a little bit of a market crash. However, they were also, closing in on the click fraud and corruption and regulating tech more. Don't forget that the EU were regulating tech. There were like privacy laws. There's all these other things that were making advertisers freak out. Okay, so it's not just, it is funny how people just gloss over these things, right? Yeah. Oh, it might not be. Okay, I ordered something else. Okay. Eyebrow dye. Believe it or not, because I've got grey fucking eyebrow hairs now. Get the fuck out of here. No one told me about that shit. Anyway, so.
I think it would have been very, very challenging for Twitter to live right now. So what happened, unfortunately, after that, after the bid was made and the market went down, is, he wanted to back away. He did have a option to back away at $1 billion and just walk away. But there was this fight about bots, and the company took him to court when he backed out, and that's when things really went south. Fortunately, he decided to make it, but I think it set up a dynamic where he had to be very hasty. He had to be impatient. He had to move as quickly as possible with features, even if they weren't fully thought out. And it all looked fairly reckless. But I do have confidence that he'll figure it out. I do have confidence in his new CEO. And I own, 3% of this new company. So I'm supportive. I have questions about, certain things, and I have questions about the long-term aspects of free speech on a corporate-owned platform, no matter who the owner is.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so, this is pretty much what I've been saying, which is that, the way that it was handled was not great. But I tend to be like the fact that he was like long on this stuff and he sort of supports Elon Musk. Like, again, you got to look at things from a different angle. Okay. Like, which is that on balance, I do tend to support, like, obviously he doesn't, I've said this repeatedly, which is that I just think he bit off more than he can chew in terms of he didn't have full visibility. Okay, let me reword it. There's a benefit in doing work from the bottom, from the small business, from the small creator, like individual workers, people who are sort of running and on the ground every day, sort of battling to survive, which is that they have a different perspective on how things are operating. That's why when I used to run like digital strategy workshops and that sort of stuff, I wouldn't just have the execs in there. I'd actually have like the people, the front line, right? I'd actually have admin, the office, because sometimes like the executive assistant or the office manager or whatever is actually the most powerful and most influential person in the business, and they actually run things on a day-to-day basis. And I think that what happened with tech is that they kind of got away from listening to everyday, ordinary small business users. They became basically, it was all just sort of top-down strategic because they, these massive corporations are spending billions of dollars. They sort of got away from that initial value proposition, which was I've always had trouble trying to sell to like SMEs Twitter as an advertising platform. Like people just don't understand it, they don't get it, they're not on it. So basically it's either those who are corporate employees or people who are in media or CEOs or those sorts of people. They're the people who are on Twitter and, academics and that sort of stuff, right? And journalists who work for corporate media. So they kind of just followed their customer, but they lost their way with ordinary users and they just stopped. I think at some point they just stopped trying to sell to small businesses. They stopped caring about sort of people like me, and they started to only care about the the client services people and the account directors and all those PR people and stuff and comms and all those teams in corporations, right? Waffling. And so that was where I think the pivot they fucked up, which is because we all know that when you're paid a fortune by that you're bored. Right. This is part of the reason why I'm so fucking stressed out all the time, is because I know that I could go and play this game and go and pitch, all of these sorts of things to a corporation, but I know that they would never do what I suggest. They would never actually implement things in the right way. And that's why another reason why I actually prefer working with SMEs if I can, or small teams within a corporation. Sometimes I've actually found a sweet spot where you've got a small, agile team within a larger corporation, because that runs very similar to a small business. Like a lot of these, especially with something like a big company like Amazon or Facebook or, a tech company, or, they kind of run somewhat like small businesses because they're so fucking siloed and detached from each other. They literally just operate their own sort of market and ecosystems. They've got their own like economy, right, underneath. And so there's, but anyway, so I think they just always struggled to reach Twitter's proposition was always in sort of micro influencers, okay, and a lot of fandoms and really high value with micro influence and celebrities and sort of very small, communities, okay, but that was at odds, obviously, with people like me. Are directly at odds with Nestle, because I tell Nestle to go fuck themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they've always struggled in that regard. But anyway, so. But yeah, so they're moving on to speech now, okay?
Those are solvable.
Speak to that piece. First, specifically with regard to Elon, do you think he's lived up to his own free speech commitments on the platform? And then what do you see as the...
Can I just rant about something very quickly? I get very annoyed with people conflating someone's personal viewpoint with commercial reality. And they're not, I think if we work from a baseline assumption that someone can express an opinion about a thing and it not work in that setting, that doesn't make them a hypocrite. It makes them an adult. It makes them a fucking grown-up, where you go, no, this is my ideal position. This is what I think, okay? This is what I believe. And people come along for that ride, or they don't. But there's a commercial reality, there's a political reality, there's a, technical reality, there's all of these realities. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily make you a hypocrite. It makes, like I said, it makes you a fucking adult. And these guys, part of these guys that have had a fit with me lately is that I've said, this is a toddler's view of things. When you just like, he said he was a free speech person. Yeah, he is. But he works in the world. If you think that is a point to make, then it's not. Like, I don't see it's like, do you think he's it's like, yeah, anyway. People can have their opinions and they are separate from their fucking, like, the reality and their behavior and what they do. They are not one and the same. Okay, I have my ideals, I communicate my ideals, and then I understand that I go back and I work in the world. Stop calling people hypocrites because they fucking, like, this actually does my head in. It's like, yeah, is it ill-advised when you are like Elon Musk to come out and say these things? But he said I'm a free speech absolutist. I'll do the best I can within the law, which is a naive view because we'll get to that. But it's like, that's a perfectly reasonable adult thing. If you're sitting there pitching a fit because you can't misgender trans people on Twitter, look at your life. Okay, if you're sitting there saying, tear it all to the ground, fuck Elon Musk, I'm deleting everything and I'm fucking having... You're a toddler. Okay? If you like these fucking right-wingers in the US, these free speech people, oh my God, they're fucking morons. They don't even, anyway, don't get me started. Right? Yeah, occasionally there is privilege to let your deep beliefs and principles influence business, but it's rare. Exactly. And you know what? I do that. It costs me. This is, again, people, you can always tell when people haven't run a business because having principles costs you. You have to give up so much to make your money. You have no idea how ass fucked every fucking business. You think being a corporate middle manager is an ass fucking? Try being a vendor for a major corporation where they go, no, they negotiate you down. They fucking extract more work and more payment. They take 100. They go, no. Do you know what? One company that I worked for, I had my contract, and they went, copy and paste our contract and put it into yours. And I went, okay, I need the money. 120-day terms, payment terms, all of this stuff. I don't know what luxury fucking universe. If anything, it shows that the richest man on earth is still not immune from having to compromise. Sign our master contract, yeah. And we'll pay you when we feel like it. And, accounts payable will just it's like you've got you do the work up front. Like I usually ask for 50% up front, but you can't do that. You got to do the work up front, which means I had to, with a few of them, I've had to hire people and pay them out of my own pocket before I even got paid, and it wouldn't be for months. And sometimes what happens is I'm always in this position where I'm the last to get paid, always, because everything that because I tried to pay my contractors as much, as quick, right, and I really fucking it stresses you just anyway. It's just not worth it. If you don't know that reality, and if you don't live that reality, then you're very lucky and privileged. Okay, it's like when I've had these anyway. Don't get me started. People have no idea how fucking hard it is to run a business, and how fucking backbreaking it is for small amounts of money. It's just that I can only bear that slightly more than I can bear fucking being a corporate middle manager and having to but seriously, there's a handful of companies that get paid enough to deal with that stuff. It is extremely stressful as a small business operator and as a small vendor. If you are working in a company, make sure that you pay your vendors quickly. It's like the least you can do. I just fire people who don't pay me now. I just don't even take it on. But it's just, yeah. Yeah, I know, yeah. So, sorry, I know you were agreeing. I know, I'm actually just building on what you're saying and validating what you're saying, which is that it is really fucking hard. And they basically just go, no, you haven't. Thankfully, we're starting to move towards the unfair terms. But in order to fight the unfair terms of a contract, you need a lawyer. You need to be able to pay a lawyer. You need to be able to afford to be able to take action. And they've got unlimited resources and unlimited power. Okay. That's just, again, a reality. It's free speech. It's like fucking, this is why these media people give me the shits, because they're actually just, as much as I do quite like Crystal Ball sometimes, mostly. I watch Breaking Points because they're, everything is about the least shit analysis from media people. My contempt for media people and stuff in general is pretty high. And I expect better from people who should know better. And they live in a bubble and they don't realize that, I think isn't she an accountant? She should know that there's a price attached to money. Everyone just, with Joe Rogan, it's like, oh yeah, he's got $100 million. You don't think that he pays a massive amount of, you're just so fixated on the money and you're so obsessed with the money that you don't realize that you give up everything. Money isn't everything. Being a billionaire is not, being rich isn't everything. It makes a lot of problems go away for you, yes, but it doesn't mean that your life is great. It doesn't change anything about your life. It does, more money, more problems, okay? More responsibilities and more liability and more fucking, it's just this is my problem with, I guess, the dirt bag left, for lack of a better word, is they have no fucking concept of what it means to actually have money and be responsible for feeding people and having to it's well, even the people, you call accounts payable with a corporation and the accounts payable person feels like shit. And they're like, I wish I could. It's these are complex problems. You've got to be able to navigate these systems. Okay. So anyway, let's keep going. I just get fucking pissed off about this is a stupid. The thing is that I get frustrated because these guys build an audience and they say things, but they're very simplistic. And I'm not expecting them to have a deep understanding. But, you know, like, what a stupid, dumb political culture wars question. It's a moot point. Everyone knew that when Elon Musk was saying, I'm a free speech absolutist, and I just went, yeah, that's not going to happen. We all knew that. If you don't know that, you're an idiot. If you think that, it's just like fucking hell. Anyway.
Speech commitment and a for-profit company?
Well, it depends on where you want the free speech, because we were more, ideally going for a global appreciation of free speech, and free expression itself. And Elon took on a principle of anything that's allowed by law on the platform, which sets up a dynamic where you have countries like India and Turkey who made many requests to us back in the day to take down particular journalist accounts or give contact information and remove them from the platform. So I think it's easier to do in the US, but at the same time, you are dependent right now upon a advertising model, and the advertisers can do things like boycott until policies are changed or actions are taken. And we saw that almost every year I was at the company, we saw that. So my one goal before I left the company was to
yeah, and so this is the reality. So I was just playing with my, because, I don't play videos. I'm still playing with my scenes and stuff. I just do it real time. It's just easier. But, he is being very careful with his words here. But I think he's actually got which is that these problems did become more and more severe. But it is funny because he's basically like, well, yeah, he's kind of alluding to the fact that the US is basically everything. Yeah. Okay, so Matt says watch his eyes. And us autism, us Spurgies, okay, when you're uncomfortable, you can't, this is like a tell, okay, so I can tell. So this is what my son does, okay, so I'll say, do you want to come for a walk? And he'll go, his answer will never be yes or no. His answer is, I don't know. And do you know what? I don't know. Or do you want what? I'm going to make pasta sauce. I don't know. His answer, and it's so cute because he's done that ever since he was like little. His answer is, I don't know. And what it means is, no, but I don't want to hurt your feelings. And so he does a thing where he's like, I don't know. The answer's no. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm hoping that you forget. It's like there's all this sort of subtext. So with autism, like, yeah, maybe, yeah, same with me, like the non, maybe, yeah. And that's like a thing, that non-committal thing where it's like you can see, but also with the eyes, when I'm thinking or like my words are falling over, I mean, it could be, given Jack's high amount of charisma, extreme amounts of charisma when doing TV interviews. But I actually think he's on the spectrum, but he's very careful with his words. But you can, if you speak Spurg, and I mean that affectionately, of course, you can kind of read between the lines, which is basically, well, the US is a fucking like oligarchy, and for all meaningful, all intents and purposes, we're over a barrel with Turkey, we're over a barrel with everyone, and also the United States, despite saying that it's democratic, has a different form of pressure that's not necessarily coming from their government, but it's coming from their corporations, and the threats are much the same, right? They're very similar. So I think that that's sort of the subtext, which is that the nature, he's actually giving away a lot if you're an insider, but he's being extremely careful with his words. Saga tried to do a good follow-up question, but I think that it was a really good opportunity to dig a bit deeper with that. But I think that he's, you can tell, so the opening of this, you got to remember he was also endorsing RFK Jr., which I found very interesting. Okay, so that's another thing, but I like that guy. I joked about this on Twitter and I said, well, how is him writing a book on vaccinations any different from anyone Joe Biden being a Catholic? Like, everyone's got beliefs that aren't ideal. Again, perfect, enemy, good. But you know, like everyone's got beliefs. It's not like he's going to be, it's like, well, so everyone's got some, again, I don't even know the science. Thing is, I don't pretend to know the science. And the thing is that I've been hit with a fucking, you know, here's the studies data dick with one topic. It makes me ask questions about other things. I'm not saying that I'm anti-vax or I'm pro-vax. I'm not at all. But I am very uncomfortable with his position on this, okay? However, if you're going to look at kooky views, Joe Biden's a Catholic. How's that any different? Cherry-picked evidence that confirms belief. Well, okay, well, I'll go with the anti-war guy then. Again, I'm not saying there's not other options, but I'm saying, like, as a candidate, fuck it, you know, let's go with the one who's not dropping bombs. Okay. So anyway, but yeah, so he endorsed RFK. So the context of that is this, and also trying to win public trust, and you know, so it's more broad than that, right? Oh, did I just do that? Did I? Oh, you motherfucker. Hang on, let me find my spot. Fucking dickhead. Hang on. Sorry about this. Sorry. I accidentally clicked. Let me just wait till the camera goes up to them. Hang on. Hang on, let me just get back.
Questions about the long-term aspects of free speech on a corporate-owned platform, no matter who the owner is.
Yeah.
But those are solvable.
Speak to that piece. First, specifically with regard to Elon, do you think he's lived up to his own free speech commitments on the platform? And then what do you see as the tensions between a free speech commitment and a for-profit company?
Well, it depends on where you.
I watch it so you don't have to, Matt. Unfortunately, I'm not. I consume this stuff because, yeah, it's. Yeah. Anyway, I watch it so you don't have to.
We were more.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Ideally, going for a global appreciation of free speech, and free expression itself. And Elon took on a principle of anything that's allowed by law.
I'm changing my name to Teabag.
On the platform, which sets up a dynamic where you have countries like India and Turkey who made many requests to us back in the day to take down particular journalist accounts or give contact information and remove them from the platform. So I think it's easier to do in the US, but at the same time, you are dependent right now upon a advertising model, and the advertisers can do things like boycott until policies are changed or actions are taken. And we saw that almost every year I was at the company, we saw that. So that was something that I thought was really revealing, much like I was talking about before, where they're at the mercy of these massive corporations who are, big. A lot of this confirms this sort of woke. What is wokeism? It's like, well, yeah, they've radicalized a bunch of people, weaponized a bunch of stuff. They're at the mercy of like big food, big pharma, military industrial complex, lots of interest in this stuff. You've also got the geopolitics of all of these things, right? And, so this is where he has some visibility on that problem. And he mentioned the activist, right, activist shareholders, right, where I've noticed that with sorry, I did that thing again where I ate ice. Fucking idiot. Hang on. Very thirsty. Hang on. But you've got activist shareholders that are sort of pushing certain things, he was kind of managed out and pushed out
I mean, it's pretty clear that Jack as CEO was very not convenient to a lot of people who had interests in something like Twitter. But you've also obviously got the ear of the media, the ear of like, you know, elites and celebrities and all those things. Then you've got a bunch of people who are trying to get famous. You got that bottom up pressure of people who are trying to get famous. Then you've got that, you know, that culture of the chicken hawking where you pick a fight with someone bigger than you so that they spread your message. You've got all of these problems. And he is, you know, obviously, it's like, well, you can't ignore the United States either because it's a different type of influence. And obviously through the Twitter files, we've seen that that influence is quite pervasive, okay?
Before I left the company was to shift away from this dependency on brand advertising and move to different lines of revenue. And Elon has started with that, and I think that will help the cause of being a platform for truly free speech. But that said, he can always be compelled.
The most charismatic man in the universe, isn't he? He's so snoozy. I like him, but he's just like, are you on? I think he's on Xanax. I would be all the time. I'd be on fucking something, fucking stoner. But what's interesting there is that that's what I've been talking about with the API thing, which is that, you know, trying to get a bigger share of the revenue to not be like advertising, that's what he wants. So everyone's like, he's got no advertisers. Yeah, that's the point, cunt. You're trying to, it's like, well, you're obviously just on the advertiser's payroll. You obviously understand that you want to bullshit for money. The people who are running this have a conflict of interest, which is that they create content that's advertiser friendly, brand friendly, and does the bidding of all these fucking people. And that's why it's like, hang on, let me see if I'm running out of, see, look, my computer can't even last a stream on battery. Motherfucker. It's not going to charge, is it? No, it's charging a little bit. But it's just, I might not be able to see the chats once this turns off. Sorry. But you've got this thing where it's like, well, you're obviously just going, you lost your advertisers. They're just staging that boycott. I can't. There's no power here, unfortunately. I'm hoping, but yeah, I've only anyway. Doing the best I can do. But it's this is the thing. It's like, can you not see the conflict of interest here? With something like BuzzFeed, where their whole fucking business model was based on ads from the advertisers. They benefit from it. They have the relationships with journalists because of their, like that stuff. The whole complex, okay, of media and Twitter and, the sort of ad spend. So they're like pulling money in, spending money as a client, but also then making it back through ads. And it's just that constant conflict of interest. Deciding to go to war with advertisers, whilst necessary, because it was, they're highly over, 89% of their revenue was coming from advertisers, especially big brands. And those big brands want to control, they're going to send those media outlets to fucking go, let's have a boycott. It's like this, if anything, that whole reaction shows the machine that is at work here, which is that there's these people that just make money accusing everyone of fat phobia, to cancel whoever the fuck they want, to get rid of critics, and they all get paid from ad money and fucking dodgy banner ads and all that sort of stuff. And it's all just sponsored content that benefits like the handful of advertisers that have every tech platform over a barrel. And so basically now it's like, well, and because they're a public company, and like what Jack said, because Twitter is a public company, they didn't necessarily have veto. He didn't have veto power necessarily over any of these things because of the way, like I said, like the way he said, actually, that the way that the shareholder voting system was sort of in operation was that he didn't have the power to do this. And you had activist stockholders and people who would be more interested in making sure that you were at the mercy of these big advertisers like, pharma, food, war, destruction, political actors, dark money in politics, who are often fused with those big corporations, okay? And they're all spending a fuck ton of money. They're paying all these dodgy publications who, even if they're not receiving direct funding for the publication, like Pink News or, these rags, where they're obviously funded directly by these rich corporations and stuff. They're if not funded directly, then funded indirectly by their clickbait on Twitter, by the content that they produce on Twitter, which is, being elevated and promoted and sort of, astroturfed by bots and all of this stuff. Twitter benefits from an inflated user count by not dealing with the bots. It's all heavily manipulated and everyone's brain melts as a result. You see how it works, right? Jack has more beard than all activists combined. Yeah, he should, but he's in an impossible position. So anyway, but also that's just I would actually say that this is why he's saying what he's saying about. I find it funny that there's a whole bunch of React videos where Elon, Jack shades Elon. It's like, no, Jack acknowledges. He's like, fucking, haha, you underestimated it. Good luck, mate. Like, I'm rooting for you because it's an impossible job to have, right? No, there is no way this is a criticism of Musk at all.
He has one.
If anything, it's validating in the affirmative. He underestimated some of these things. But what surprised me about this is how much Jack knew and / didn't know. So we'll move on.
And he's one single point of failure. And pressure can be put upon him by the United States, by the Department of Defense, by China, by Turkey, by India, of course, and it will. And this is going to be the reality for any centrally controlled company or even a protocol that's centrally controlled. So the only way to truly have free speech, to truly be censorship resistant, is to work on open protocols. And there are only two at scale that I'm aware of, which is Bitcoin for money and Nostr for social media and beyond. But they're so niche right now and they're so small. And to me, it just says at the moment that people don't actually care as much about the censorship resistance. Otherwise, they would be using these technologies more. And maybe there's...
So the reason people don't probably care about the censorship is because, again, and this is where I think his wealth and his, obviously he lives in a bubble of, certain, privileges and stuff. And this is the thing in tech where how it affects the ordinary person. But most people, first of all, aren't really aware of I've talked about this like quite a bit. Well, actually not specifically here, but about the calculations that people make. And this is just basic sort of psychology, is that people sort of make these calculations about whether it's worth sticking your neck out for. Like it's not easy to put yourself out there with your real name, show up on a stream, take abuse, like everything that I've been through. And I think I've talked about this, quite a bit, which is that I wouldn't recommend doing what I do. I'm here because I was I underestimated. I love that, I didn't do it because it was easy. I did it because I thought it would be easy. I love that. And that's what I have effectively ruined my career. I've had to dig myself out of shit. I am algo fucked. I've done nothing wrong really that I can see, but I just fell afoul of all of these forces that I was like, okay, well, early on, I fell afoul of something where talking common sense was not allowed because a major sponsor, a major advertiser on Twitter, and a bunch of people decided that that what I was saying was a problem, and I had lost all of my reach, all of my fucking influence. Trying to get, you're basically yelling, punching at fucking the air. You punch in the fucking air because it looks invisible. It's like it looks like you're going crazy when you're not. You're just saying, no, you got to understand that, like, I'm speaking common sense, but common sense is no longer allowed on social media. And I think that that's the problem, is that people you only really understand the degree to which we are not allowed to speak when you either you rub up against it accidentally and find yourself in this position. And the only reason that I haven't sort of monetized it or gone in a certain direction or managed to be successful is because I won't go right. I won't do this I won't turn it into, I actually care legitimately about the problem and the solutions. I don't. I'm a content creator by mistake because I needed to find out what was going on, and now I actually kind of enjoy it a bit. And but I can take or leave the fucking money part as long as I can survive and pay my bills. I'm not really too worried about the rest of it because I know what you've got to do that. I know what you've got to give up. I know what you have to sacrifice. I had no idea the degree to which I would have to sacrifice my sense of self, my integrity, my education, the things I know to be true, my voice, all of those things, my reputation. I had no idea what sacrifice I'd be making for merely talking about the fact that the internet is like largely manipulated. And I had no idea to the degree to which it was happening. I had no idea that people would not oppose it. Right. So the fact that like it's obvious that this whole fucking woke, I'm going to use fat phobia or, as a good example, which is the body positivity movement, which started as, Marilyn Wan's book, which was, the Fat and Fit, what was it called? I can't remember. But there was this whole movement on the internet, which was good idea, which is that you can be, or the obesity myth. That was another book. Where it was just basically there's some studies around the fact that this a valid critique of media, which was that there's too many skinny, unrealistic, photoshopped, like representations of what a woman is or what, and that you can actually, and also this idea that you can be, overweight, like the books were actually just overweight, not fucking morbidly obese. Like you can be overweight and fit, right? That's true, like scientifically true. But then obviously you see big food seeing an opportunity in that and like going, well, I don't, make it, individualizing it and turning it into this like insane fucking idea that I can eat what I want, do what I want, because they want a lifetime customer who is fucking, all the corporate, they own this shit. So people who are on the board of Unilever and on the board of it's like BlackRock, they own chunks of all of these companies. They fucking profit from the whole thing. Every part of the supply chain, every single part of every single company is owned by like 5 fucking hedge funds, okay? So even the CEOs have a boss, which is these guys, okay, or these people, right? So, but it's just like, but that's where, you accuse someone, like make people believe that any criticism of what they eat is fucking racist, equivalent to racism and bigotry, where it's like, well, no, I'm saying that if you keep eating like that, you're going to die at 40, okay? Or, because I know what it's like to be very, very fat, okay? And it's not good. It's not healthy. But I also know what it's like to sort of fool yourself into thinking that. And, I've lived, this is very much a very real part of my fucking psychology. I've got a fucking rearing, flaming eating disorder because of my, it's like, I can't, like, I'm not, it's not, I'm saying I'm like the fattest anorexic in the world. You have any idea? But I'm just saying, like, it's just, I understand this sort of psychology around dieting and that sort of stuff, and that desire to make it activism for the fact that you won't exercise. I get it, right? It's a rationalization, but you can see how these forces are like, well, anything like the fact that you're drinking Coke. Yes, it's nobody's business. I get that. Do what you want to do, okay? I understand, but people are allowed to be concerned and allowed to sort of say stuff where it's like, and yes, again, you got to deal with root cause, right? So obviously the reason why people eat the way they do is because they're working too hard and they can't afford fucking all that other stuff. I'm saying that there is no one talks about the conflict of interest between the fact that the tech's top advertisers also happen to be ground zero for fucking cancelling people who criticise big food, who criticise pharma, who criticise all these things. That's a linear, pretty fucking direct relationship. And that's part of the reason why our media laws are the way they are, that you can't own every newspaper this is a loophole. The internet's a loophole for that shit. And it's like, okay, well, you can't own more than one newspaper in each state. You can't, all of those sort of laws, right? So I'm digressing. But I'm just saying, like, it's pretty fucking obvious that advertisers, who are large corporations, have everyone over a barrel. They have the government over a barrel.
Not much of a need just yet, and certainly the accessibility and the approachability of these systems is rather arcane for all people in the world, but that will change. So I think we'll see how important censorship resistance truly is to people, when some of these issues come up in the future. And it's no fault of Elon, no fault of anyone at the top of one of these companies. It's just impossible to avoid not having to take actions when there's a particular entity, be it a government or your customers, requesting that you do something or they leave.
Right. Jack, one of the things that a lot of people focused on are the Twitter files. Do you think that accurately reflected decision making, so what was taking place, at the company around so many of these sensitive topics? And what's your reflection on
I've made
that,
this drag on, haven't I? Yeah.
I wish that the full corpus of the emails and all the information was released, so that more journalists and everyone in the world could see everything. Because I think there is some context missing when you pick parts, and it's no fault of the reporters necessarily. They had a tool and they had to ask questions of the tool, and that tool would give them back fragments of information, and that might lead them to get the other fragment to provide more context. But if everything was available, I think we'd have a better picture. I think the company, my leadership style in the company was just to trust our folks and that they were doing the right things. There's a lot of stuff in the Twitter files that.
Yeah, so that's my leadership style as well, which is, you're an adult. I trust you. I wouldn't hire you if I didn't trust you to do the right thing. And if you break that trust, then, obviously, I want to know why, all that sort of stuff. I tend to be benefit of the doubt, right? And that was his, leadership style, which he got a lot of flack for, okay? They always argued that he was like checked out, but I would argue that he was just not authoritarian. Like everyone's had a manager who's like just he's not a micromanager, and he didn't know, and he was sort of in over his head. And I kind of maybe I'm projecting onto Jack, but I just kind of I understand where they're coming from, which is that it's a different school of thought, right? Yeah. So I always pick trusting people and learning with them over any other way. Yeah, and also like micromanagement, first of all, doesn't work. I tend to be like one of the things that like part of the reason why I don't like having too many like part of the reason why I don't need like an assistant. I had one assistant once, and she was so good at speaking Taya and just following through. But it's because it's because of, it's its own. When you've got a particular leadership style, especially like a big picture entrepreneurial. And you're also very busy and all that sort of stuff, you can sort of give incomplete information and stuff. So having somebody who can just execute what you are saying without you having to that's a big part of tech, right? Which is just because there's just so much going on and so many moving parts. And also because most of the people in tech are not fucking infants. Up until recently, but most of the, engineers, they're very, they're very smart people. They're quite capable, and especially working in a tech company where they screen that stuff, and they're all capable adults. They're trusted to do the right thing. They usually deliver, and that's just a cultural thing with tech. Like, I don't trust anybody who thinks that Jack, because if he was across the details of this, I'd be very surprised. Because like this was a team, what was it, 7,500 staff, and also that would mean that he was he was too involved in the minutia, which means that he was jumping out of his lane. Like, one thing is that he's just a founder. He knows what he's doing. He made a product. He's a spokesperson for the product. He has and it's like, well, anyway. So he hired people to do the right thing. Okay. And I've talked about that before, which is when you actually look at the Twitter files, they had no chance. Even the best people in the world, I've often reflected on that, on whether I could have done any differently. And I don't think I would have done any differently, mostly because they were operating in a space of good faith. They were being socially engineered and manipulated by these people. Okay, they were being primed. Like this whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, a big part. I think people gloss over a lot of that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I talked about that before. I think this, didn't I? I think I went through this in quite a lot of detail with a lot of the stuff with Twitter is that you just don't get past level 1 and level 2 support because the way that these systems are designed to operate is that they mass report you, or they do follow unfollow. They get your account to the point where the algorithm goes, this is a fucking problem. But it's not a problem that's escalated so a human looks at it and goes, oh, this is an unfair flagging of the account. What it does is it just gives you a thing. So it goes into the special filing cabinet where you go, oh, yeah, because they get so many emails and all that sort of stuff. So the way that the platform manipulations work, it's not even that it doesn't even touch a human, let alone get escalated. But once it did get escalated to that team, it seems like they deal really well. My dealings with Twitter, I mean, yes, I'm frustrated that they haven't really, dealt with things the way that I wanted, but that's mostly because they haven't hired me and I'm fucking pissed off about it because I want to work there. I want to work on a social media platform at the moment. I really do, but I just, I can't get in and that's fine. But it's just, my interactions with Ella, they were always good faith. And the one thing that I found interesting is that Musk has been tweeting a little bit about this, which is that every week or so they seem to be finding a new way of fucking with people, a new script or a new vulnerability, and I've said this before, they don't have visibility on it because of that whole, the leaky bucket problem that I've talked about, right? But generally, people have operated everything in the Twitter files. Like the fact anybody who comes away from that thinking that it was a conspiracy is a complete fucking nut. And they have never run anything in their lives. I would be actually quite proud of my team, based on that stuff, and go, okay, they did a great job because it's an impossible situation. If you think it's not an impossible, much like these fucking, free speech people or free speech absolutists or fucking lefties or anything like those people, if you can always tell who actually knows what they're talking about, or knows what they're doing, or has actually showed up to anything or tried to do anything in their lives. They're in that arena, right? You can always tell because do you know what the first thing they do is? They say, it's fucking complicated. They don't have one answer for anything, okay? So the first thing, I just don't bother. I just go, I'm dealing with a toddler who doesn't do anything. They haven't actually built a product. They don't know how it works. Fucking whatever, okay. Same with politics. Day one, people don't know what they're talking about. Dismiss their opinions. Okay, I will listen to their opinions, but I will take it on I'll take it within that context unless you prove to me that you actually know what you're talking about. And that's the problem. I've talked about this before, where all opinions are now considered fucking equal opinions. It's like, well, no, I've worked my ass off to make sure that my opinion fucking actually counts for something. Should count for something. The fact that I can't, I'm so fucking resentful about the fact that I feel like I've earned my way through this. I don't know how to get out of it because of all of this stuff that, I'm up against. But I just, and now I've got to explain the fucking 5-year gap because I've followed this thing. And, he's not saying, all he's doing is validating what I've said anyway.
I never saw because it wasn't at that level. And I was surprised by the level of engagement with government agencies. I was surprised by the request. But if you look at that, our people, our team members, they push back on a lot of that stuff. Not all of it, but a lot of it was questionable. So I think it shows a company that is struggling. It remains the most important public square in the world right now. And it was so challenging to work in that environment. We were under a microscope from day one of the company.
It's really hard,
man. It creates stresses that are just unbelievable. But I think they acted with fairness. I think they generally did the right thing. Of course, we made a bunch of mistakes, especially around the New York Post and the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. So with the Hunter Biden thing, people forget about this, but a big part of the reason that happened was that they were primed weeks before, saying basically, oh well, we expect that this thing will happen in this way. So then it fucking shows up And they go, oh, that's the thing they warned us about. They were like, I would have gone, oh, yeah, okay, better do that. Listen to the interview. I'm wondering whether I should do this. If you're interested in me sort of watching these interviews and talking about them, I'm not sure if people see value in it, so I don't. But Zuckerberg with Lex Fridman, he had a lot to say there as well. I'd be more than happy to just sit and do fucking this, but I just don't think people are very interested in it. I mean, but they're saying it across the board, which is that they're doing the best they can fucking do. And like everything, the perfect is always the enemy of the good. Do it, enemy of the good. Do it my way. And I only have one blinkered ideology, and therefore, if you don't do it 100%, that's authoritarian. Anybody who's like, you must do things 100% of the way I want things to be, and there are no fucking other alternatives, and it's my way. I want it, Daddy. I want it now. It's fucking Veruca Salt bullshit. And it's like, well, Willy Wonka's fucking here. Okay, so there is, and gaming videos, yes. Okay, yes, I want to do that. I need the gear. There's only so much you can do there. But I'll do my best. But it's just, what was I going to say? Yeah, so let's continue.
I believe they're good people, and that
I actually really would. I'd quite happily sit for a few hours a day just reacting and doing stuff. I would be quite happy to do that. I'm not sure if anyone would tune in because it's a lot of time. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of time out of my day to dedicate to sort of. But if I could grow that,
they could with the information that they had, and I wish, in retrospect, I was a little bit more hands-on in that area. My focus was on, when I came into the company, we were losing users, and my focus was just to grow the company again, grow the usage base, grow the revenue, and we did. We actually became a profitable company. We got onto the S&P 500. We had $5 billion a year in advertising revenue, and we were shifting away from advertising at the same time and growing. So I didn't focus on that area as much as I probably should have in retrospect, and asked more questions. It was all reactive when I did, but it's a tough situation. But I think the company did well, but certainly we could have done better. And I do believe that we were more fair and more introspective than our peers.
In terms of content,
that's a good point too, which is that Twitter would still and remain the less shit option when it comes to this stuff, right? And now under Musk, definitely. I'm still, as much as I'm frustrated and I feel like I'm done with Twitter, and unfortunately we live in a reality where, it's not just about whether I personally like Twitter, it's about whether the audience, it's what other people think about Twitter, it's whether other people come back to Twitter, and whether because obviously it's not just about whether you like Twitter as a platform. When you're doing content and when you're actually, trying to reach audiences, and you do need to think about if your people are actually there. I mean, I've got a Mastodon instance, right? But there's nobody there. And so it's like, well, I may as well just go back to LinkedIn. It's like, where do you get discovered? Anyway, that's a whole other thing about earned media somewhat not being a thing anymore. You can't really earn it unless you have there's a specific currency in earned media that most people, many people shouldn't have to pay if they don't want to, and I won't pay that price for earned media. So I would rather just pay to boost my shit and pay for ads and pay to promote, but I obviously need to make the money to pay the money, that cycle. So and that's where that sort of dark money backing and those sorts of things come into play, where if you really want to do your content, you have to take money from somewhere, or take money, it's like, well, where do I find the money? Okay, well, client work. Okay, well, clients, then I've got to work 12, 14 hours a day because clients expand to fill the space that they're in work-wise. And it's like, okay, well, then you don't have time to create the things that you need to create to build. You see the problem that we've got with this model, okay? So anyway.
Context. You said you felt that some of the context was missing. Do you have specifics there of things that you wish were included or that you felt painted a misleading portrait?
Nothing in particular that comes to mind. I mean, it just, it's hard to there's just so much context in those emails and the communications, and even within that, we would have in-person meetings that would discuss things that may not be represented in the written communication.
And this is true. Like this is why when I was talking, you know how you reverse engineer, how I reverse engineered a lot of this stuff is that because I know how these meetings generally run, I know the process, I know how these teams work together, I know, you know, how things can get siloed and how, you know, rogue staff and individual people and, you know, and the culture of Twitter was an aspect. Like you've got to be able to reverse engineer some of this stuff. And that was what I was saying before about how I did try to actually provide some of that context to try and educate people so that they, so I did try to actually provide as much of that context as I possibly could from the outside, and you know, because you can actually see some of these problems that they sort of bleed out. So even if you're not internal, you can sort of, you know, if you've got enough experience, things sort of, you know, bleed out from that, right? I did try to provide some of that context, but that was the thing is that as soon as that's a culture wars thing, all context is gone. It's either a fucking conspiracy with pizza and babies and fucking pedophiles and bullshit, fucking whatever, or it's some vast Nazi conspiracy with fucking whatever. It's like, it's not a conspiracy. If you are a functioning adult that works in a job of any fucking stature and pay attention to anything and know how tech works, you see where all of these things went wrong. And that's why most people disengage from your stupid bullshit. All your fucking conspiracies and stuff. It's like, it's not how the world works. Doesn't matter what side of politics you're on. If you're too online and you are only consuming one ecosystem of content, and if you're repeating the same words as I can tell what you're saying, like who you're watching based on what you say. Okay, if you're that predictable to me, that's a sign that you need to watch different stuff. Like I'll jump around and use different terms, okay? I try to use terms that meet people where they're at. I try not to use too much academic language and stuff like that, mostly because my memory doesn't fucking work as well. My assistant's got me another coffee. Thank you. Did you not? Violet! Paul thinks that that's the fun. It's amazing what makes my husband laugh. He thinks that that when I go far left, far right, take down. He thinks that's the funniest thing I've ever said. He said, stop speaking shit about him. That's not going to happen. That's the stuff he knows about. Kidding. We actually watch these back, so it's like, because I get his feedback. But it's but I did try really hard to provide that context. But I do try to just explain things as much as I can. And obviously, as you're trying to make it, like, because we're dealing with complexity, you have to simplify. Otherwise, these things would be fucking hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. They're already long enough, right? We should do you know what, Matt, if you're still there, we should actually just set up our own gaming channel and just fucking co-op shit and just like talk shit and do it on Twitch as a separate thing. Let's just do a separate thing and just play on Xbox and shit and record and stream that shit. We should do that. Anyway, let's keep going.
So there's nothing that like stands out, but I believe like if you truly want to show how one of these systems work, which I'm fully supportive of opening all this stuff up. We were trying to like figure out how to do that ourselves before I left. And one of my goals is to be the most transparent company in the world. But to only give access to a few people with a tool that, you know, takes these fragments, I think that there could have been a better approach, and that would just be open up the whole thing.
Jack.
And this is a very valid point, and I 100% agreed with that. And I mean, I would have liked to have just been able to look myself and validate some of the suspicions that I had, and provide, you know, the people that watch me with explanations about what I suspected is happening, and see if there's some sort of evidence. Like, I'm not a journalist. I don't claim to be a journalist. It would have been better if we had access, you know, to go, you know what, I've got some burning questions that I really want to answer for my audience. I want to educate people. And it's just a real shame that access didn't happen in that manner. It's maybe at some point there might be some sort of data dump once they've cleaned it all up. I'm hoping. Musk has actually indicated that maybe it's still occurring, and transparent. It's hard because it's obviously got to be vetted by legal, and there's been like changes and all that sort of stuff. So I have a feeling that may come. I do have a feeling that may eventually occur. It's just going to be slow going, and also because you're dealing with geopolitical shit, you're dealing with legal shit, you're dealing with lots and lots of fucking liability, and potential charges, potential lawsuits. Like even then, my interactions with Twitter have been that like they don't answer you when they think there's a lawsuit in it. Like they obviously have everything vetted by legal, and rightly so, right? But that's the barrier that you're up against. It's not, again, this is that naivety that do you think that Twitter's just gonna do you not think that? I just don't know. I don't know what's in people's heads where they go, wow, this ideal version of everything that I do, and it doesn't work this way. And that's not practical. It's never going to work. But, how about we talk about it from this ideal point of view where fucking unicorns exist? It's like, well, that's not policy. That's a novel. That's fantasy. Okay. That's world building. It's not policy. Okay. Speaking of which,
I think you're in a unique position. You believe in free speech. That's something I've never doubted about you. You also are in the unique position of having run one of these companies. Can you give us some anecdotes, as you alluded to, foreign
this is
governments
crazy,
and the pressures that you were under?
I knew about it.
Able just to give the audience an idea of what it is really like to be in a position to have some of the most powerful people literally on earth coming to you and demanding things of your company, and as someone.
You know what I find hilarious? So I just want you to, I actually want to focus on this part because this is your brain on America brain, everyone. So pay attention to what Jack's about to say. Okay. And then see what Crystal's solution is.
With principles, how did you navigate that?
India, for example. India is a country that had many requests of us around the farmers' protest, around particular journalists that were critical of the government. And it manifested in ways such as we will shut Twitter down in India, which is a very large market for us. We will raid the homes of your employees.
So we will use the power of the state, the police, the military, and all of the state's resources in which to harass you if you don't do what we say.
Which they did.
Important point.
We will shut down your offices if you don't follow suit. And this is India, a democratic country. Turkey is very similar. Like we had so many requests from Turkey. We fought Turkey in their courts and often won, but they threatened to shut us down constantly. Nigeria, yet another one. I don't think we could even put people on the ground because of.
So we're threatening you with the power of the state and the police and the military, and we're using all of our administrative and institutional power to threaten you to do what we want. Okay.
The government might do to our employees if we had them there. And then, of course, the U.S. We started a long time ago a transparency report about all government requests into us. And we're continuing to make it more fine-grained. And these were requests of takedowns or investigations or any number of things that a government would request of us, especially the U.S. government. And I wasn't as deep in those conversations, but I would say that it feels super challenging because you have the U.S. government asking you things, and then when asking you to do things, and then also
so the most powerful government in the world that is known to bully and harass everyone who doesn't do what it says, and who, for all intents and purposes, is not a democracy and not transparent in any way, who's in bed with it's basically an oligarchy, in bed with corporations, and the U.S. government is intimidating Twitter and doing all of those things.
Congress. I testified before Congress 4 times for
threatening antitrust and regulations
each time, with the most
threatening to break them up,
discussion. These frame questions of yes or yes
declaring war on them.
with the ability to provide no context whatsoever, so that the Congress people and the senators could actually understand and again have context for the problems we're trying to solve.
Politicians don't have any fucking idea what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. We saw Matt Taibbi. We saw that fucking shit show with Matt Taibbi and that psycho, like in the hearings. Okay, the way that they've done this with Mark Zuckerberg and Jack before. The way that they treated Matt Taibbi was, they've got a history of coercion, of threats, of using the power of every government agency to fuck shit up.
Together for the people of the United States,
getting to my point.
People of these other countries, but it just felt like attacks all the time from every angle. Everything we did really upset the right, and everything we did really upset the left. Like you could not. There's no way to win
because we were compromised by the culture wars, right?
You referred earlier to the fact that there hasn't been a large adoption of some of the Twitter alternatives, and you said that calls into question how much people actually care about these questions of censorship. I view it a little bit differently, which is that it seems to me that these platforms are kind of like the definition of a natural monopoly, right? The reason people are staying on Twitter is because people are on Twitter, right? There's already this critical mass of individuals there. So given the fact that, first of all, I would be curious if you agree with that assessment that they're sort of natural monopolies because the value comes in having the sizable social network. Should they be regulated then more like public utilities, which is the other sort of famous example of a natural monopoly?
So the government should regulate. That's the... And I understand, like, I'm trying to be charitable. I understand that they're talking about regulation, not ownership. And like, but it's like, do you want your social platforms like run by the US government? With everything that you've just heard. Everything. Anyway, that made me fucking laugh. It's like, this is not the solution. If in unicorn land, where the United States was a democracy and that there was that it wasn't just opposite land where words don't have any meaning and everything is the opposite, and I just accuse everyone else of doing the thing I'm doing and everyone's just on a fucking grift, and there's not ad fraud, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in an ad fraud in a Ponzi scheme that is fucking, the biggest fucking scam of all time, which is this fucking, media politico complex that's developed online. Oh yeah, maybe we should have the government that has literally been doing all of the stuff on behalf of these. Oh, that'll fix the problem. Anyway, Jack was very diplomatic with his answer, which is the answer is decentralization and government not being able to touch the fucking thing. No regulation. No. I don't want governments in charge of speech.
I think
especially the US.
Monopolies happened for a time, but they're easily disrupted. I don't think it's as challenging as one would think. I mean, Twitter has only been around for 17 years, which seems like a long time, but there was a MySpace before that and a Friendster before that and a Usenet before that, which was completely
Usenet is what
unknown
that's
by anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think more government regulation is necessarily the right answer to ward off the monopoly aspects or fix some of the issues. Mm-hmm. I think having an open protocol that no one actually owns and governments and corporations can't bend to their will is the most important thing that allows for the most creative solutions to all the problems we see, including protecting freedom of speech and including providing safety for folks who want it. And my hope is that, as we build these technologies like Nostr and Bitcoin, that a company like Twitter adopts them because it removes a bunch of the liability they would have otherwise. And they can build phenomenal businesses on top of it. And to prove that, you see what Google has done with the web. They used an open protocol, built a phenomenal business. They built a phenomenal business on Gmail, which is an open protocol for email. There are real opportunities building on open protocols where at the same time, the foundational aspect of it, the foundational layer, that people own, and a company can't bend towards its will one way or the other.
Jack, what do you think about AI
Yes.
regulation? You're a
Oh, who cares
technologist.
about that?
Do you
So basically, I mean, what he's saying is 100% correct. And the reason why I'm particularly fucking annoyed with this public utility thing is because this is where, like, online left people, right, are brain broken, where they think that US state ownership, even though they're like, oh yeah, it's like a one-party system and it's an oligarchy and it's like, well, I'd argue that's a kleptocracy, but you know, in a country that is largely heading, it's already totalistic. It's a war between two totalistic tribes, right? Which is like you got the center-right fucking totalitarians and the fucking right totalitarians, and there's no room outside of that. It's basically just a fucking oligarchy at this point. And also a military dictatorship where they can actually, they've been on record as weaponizing the government, on record as you know, the government being completely fucking incompetent when it comes to all of these hearings. Absolutely, like, no regard for the impact that it's had, not just in the United States, but outside of the United States. Literally, like, I go, how, you know, when you look at like Russia, right? When you look at Russia and China and the way that narrative takes over with those things that you don't know, we're all receiving propaganda, how compromised by propaganda these platforms are. And you go, no, I think the people that are currently running that right now, I reckon they do a great job of regulating it. It's like, get fucked. No way. But it's one of those things that Crystal particularly has repeated several times. And so I just sit there and I go, that's not the answer at all. And it does actually show like these sort of, you know, obviously they're journalists, so they're not the most clever people on the planet anyway. But as journalists go, she's pretty clever. For a journalist, she's clever. Ish. And it's, but the Americans have no fucking idea. Like, even the most like reasonable left-wing American has no concept of what it's like to be outside of the United States and be subjected to their media and have it inflicted on us all the time. Their culture wars are our culture wars. Their problems are our problems multiplied. Like, they're only upset because, you know, people, the spy, like the NSA shit, the Edward Snowden thing. Edward Snowden, obviously, he talked to me about this and he was like, okay, well, I obviously understand that, but we're just talking about, but it's like the big controversy was not the fact that people were being spied on at all. It was that they were doing it to United States citizens. It's still perfectly fine to do it to me, Australian. Okay. It's perfectly fine for them to fucking fuck around with our government and, you know, make it so that we can't feasibly do any kind of like, you know, remotely socialist policy without, you know, them basically getting rid of our government. Or like, you know, it's like we can't side with China. We're not allowed to. We're under coercion. We're forced. We don't even get a vote. And that's the thing, is like, no, you really want us to sign on to a fucking public utility set up in America where, like, and again, I'm not saying that there's not alternative ways to look at that, but I don't fucking want American regulations without a vote. Get fucked. You've already taken enough from us. We don't get a say in like anything anymore. Our news and media, and like, we have no local content on our fucking media. Everything, this brain virus, like that is the culture wars, is like infecting every aspect of our fucking life. You've got like all of these like idiots who are like American bullshit, who don't even know that we don't have First Amendment. Like, fucking hell. And it's just like, no, I don't want them like running things. Get fucked. They already run enough. They can't have it. And it's like, yes, okay, here you go. If there was a world government organization that was decentralized, where each country was federated and these platforms ran independently in every, you know, they do actually have headquarters in every country that they operate. There is a Twitter Australia, there's a Twitter Ireland, there's, you know, all these things. They're all running independently as right now. Okay. And it's running that way. Like, if you've gotten reported with the German hate speech thing, you see that you get the German, they report you under Germany, you get the German reporting system. It's doing that like right now. And yeah, I mean, America could probably like do that, but I don't want them fucking running the show on our stuff. Get fucked. It's a global company. And also, one of the things that I've said before is that there is some credence to this notion of this invisible hand. Now, if you don't know about the invisible hand, which is that, you know, through self-interest, like as people, you know, like corporations, people, you know, whatever, through this self-interest, Okay, even if they're terrible people, the selfish people, capitalism is correcting because ultimately they've still got to do the right thing in order to like make it in the marketplace. So they're hang on, my brain isn't. But you know, by operating in self-interest and pursuing like profit, that it's going to become obviously, you know, this is something Marx criticized, but it's that it will be profitable to do the right thing. I mean, that's what we're seeing but this is what this woke shit is. It's like, that's what your invisible hand looks like, which is that it becomes profitable to provide lip service to idiots. It's not actually profitable to do the right thing, which is to deal with inequality and all that sort of stuff. Like, that was a Marxist critique of things, right? This is how you know this woke shit is fucking right wing capitalist. Is that wokeism is a fucking symptom of this like invisible hand theory gone wrong. And that's where this fucking, you know, billionaire foundations and like ESG shit, it's like, that's the invisible hand right there, which is that it's in their interest, in the pursuit of profit, to lie and pretend that they're doing the right thing, just and, you know, like turn it into PR and branding and shit, not actually do anything right good other than pursue profit, right? I know I'm bastardizing that theory, but I'm just saying in general but in terms of like for someone like Elon Musk, or Twitter, or you know, like a corporation like that's global corporation, it is at least in their interests. In Musk's case, in particular, with Tesla, where some people, you know, it is a conflict of interest in that he also has interest in EV like subsidies, EV taxes, EV. You know, he has a market there. Okay. Now, by having a market in China and by having a market in Australia, he's somewhat more accountable and more likely to make, this all things being equal, he's more likely to make decisions that benefit more countries that he has markets in. Like, that can actually work where, you know, it's not unless you are like a little weird fucking twisty Protestant thing about, or not Protestant, but twisty about money. And you just, billionaire, money is the root of all evil, that stuff. And just the mere wanting of money. It's like, that's a very toddler, immature view of the way it also doesn't, you know, like, again, if you use these things as a toolkit in which to solve problems rather than an ideology that is one size fits all, okay? Irony that Marx said that and Marxists fucking ignore it. But you know, that, which is the fact that his interests in Russia, his interests in China, his interests in Ukraine with Starlink, and these various interests have some level of correcting, like self-correcting power that the US government doesn't have. The United States government's interest is only in protecting the American people, and they don't even do that. But the US government's, again, this is that whole America brain where they think that they're the center of the fucking universe, and they buy this idea that somehow America's great, if not for this big evil thing that's outside of the United States, okay? This is the again, I'm not saying the United States, you know, isn't complex and beautiful and wonderful and funny and fucking great in areas, but this is that's the dissonance that's occurring with a lot of people, especially on the left with America, which is that America would be great, but for like someone else. Let's blame someone else. It's not personal responsibility. The nation of personal responsibility never actually goes within and goes, you know what, like, again, generalizing, obviously individual people and people, you know, the analysis occurs, but on the mainstream stage, and my interactions with a lot of people, especially in media, is that they sort of attach themselves to this idea that America by design is the best way to go. It's perfect, it's wonderful, and if it wasn't for those terrible corporations, it would be perfect. If it wasn't built into this, they will never accept that it's not baked into the system, right? They're still ultimately accepting the premise that capitalism and America works, okay? Now, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that this is where that disconnect seems to lie for people, even when they're on the left and even when they're so close. Ultimately, it comes down to America, great. It would be better if not, you know, here's a way. They're all ultimately MAGAs. Make America great by blaming someone other than America and let someone else take on the burden of making America great. Like, it doesn't matter which group it is. It's just it's someone else's problem. Fixing America is someone else's problem, and we're going to fix ourselves and fuck everyone else and fuck how, we are the natural order of things. It's that manifest destiny fucking brain worm that Americans seem to suffer from. Okay. So let me just go forward to here. Which is about here, I think.
User drinking their food out of straws and constant.
He says that WALL-E is actually like
and
in the
you can
future, which I
see
found
that,
funny.
like, the whole world is headed this way, and I want to believe that there's a different answer. So I don't know. It's going to happen. I'm skeptical about some of the benefits, and I
He's
hope
talking
we
about AI.
have an honest conversation about some of the harms around more and more social distancing.
I think there's been.
So he's talking about alienation, atomization, and the isolation that comes from social media. So it's good to see that he's actually. I think if Jack, like with Zuck, if they take in the scope of everything that they've sort of contributed to over the years, it's quite overwhelming. I imagine like Jack looks beaten, like, and defeated, and I've said that over the years. Like he looks like it. It looks like it bothers him, right? And he's trying, and I just get frustrated when it's like, yeah, let's just make the problem worse for someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. But it's easy when you got millions of dollars. You can just say whatever you fucking want. You don't actually need to be an expert. You just need to be popular. You can actually just say, yeah, we should just. And do you know what annoys me most about like these media, like content creator people, is that they don't have to actually implement anything. They don't actually have to solve any problems. Ideas are free. Like you can just say whatever the fuck you want, but you don't ever have to actually deal with the consequences or the fallout or the even like have the actual next steps in terms of the execution. Like there's a lot of people got a lot of ideas about a lot of things, but there are not many people who execute and succeed. Like even at the corporate level, okay, 70 to 80%, and I'd argue that it's probably more now, is that 70% of digital transformation projects fail. Okay, 80% of any kind of tech, like IT project, fails. Most strategies fail, okay? And a lot of it is like that's just the reality, is that most of these things fail. And I do not want an experiment where the United States government has any more control over the social media platforms than they do. And the answer is to decentralize and to make it so that you have privacy and that you have the ability to sue. So one of my arguments is that so that you have a greater accessibility to the legal system, so that when you are harmed, that you have recourse against these companies, much like if you are fucked over by, like a bank or whatever. I mean, obviously there is an imbalance of power and there's not enough resources, but you tax those companies like a lot of money, and you use that, you reinvest that money into the an ombudsman system or a system of appeal or like a legal process, right? That actually fucking enforces it. Now, I don't trust that's a form of regulation. Yes, technically, there's always going to be those quibbly fucks who are just like those people, but it's not. I'm saying yes, it's some sort of hybrid system, but I do not want any kind of centralized public utility that is owned by the government in any way. They need to be hands off it, and they don't need to be, like regulation. Yes, enforcement. Yes. But you fund the legal disputes. You fund that. You fund access to. You fund the process of like appeal. You do not own the product. And anyone who tries to own the product is fucking like not to be trusted, especially in light of what we've experienced. Like, I don't know how anybody could be advocate. And also, fucking who the fuck have anybody? Again, I've talked about this before. If you've ever tried to work in a fucking co-op or any kind of situation with lefties, you don't want a fucking co-op. I'm sorry, but you just don't. They're fucking like, they work sometimes with the right people, but it's really, really rare. And you got unicorn brain. Your America brain. It's like utopian bullshit. It's not going to happen. We need to focus on, because the problems are actually quite urgent, and we need to focus on what is actually achievable now, which is that these companies have too much power. There's too much data. You need to be able to fund lawsuits. You need to be able to fund like all this stuff. But also, the second part of this, which was that they need to be investing in user outreach. They need to be investing in like tech companies can't just be putting much like the cigarette companies putting a burden on the health system, or asbestos companies putting a burden on the public health system with their product. Tech should not be just passing the buck when it comes to radicalization or the need for like outreach or like the social programs that are required around radicalization, addiction, all those sorts of things. Like the paper that I've written around the white paper that I've written for my social media outreach program, that is a solution, and that is something that is, first of all, a job creation. Second of all, like the government can be involved. The government can administer that. But in terms of actually like the actual product, fuck no. I do not want the government touching speech other than to like make it free. Like, I'm sorry, but no, like it's just, and again, I know that it's like a public utility sort of thing is different from a public company, but like I can't believe that people, with everything that we know, that anyone would even remotely consider the fact that the US government should be touching, that any US agency should be touching any thing that touches our speech. They should all be in fucking prison for what they've done, as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that as soon as there's you can't. Well, obviously they haven't done anything criminal, but I'm hoping that off the back of this, there's fucking class action after class action after class action after class action. Okay, to the point where, and I think that that's what's coming. I've been saying that for years. As I said, that's why I'm retrading, because I saw this coming, which is that they've gotten, it's through the legal system, okay, that you're going to resolve these things. It's going to take time. You need to create the precedent. And once that precedent's there, that's why they settle all these things in court. Once the precedent is there, that will have knock-on effects everywhere else, and then the governments will legislate. You need to force it. It's a ground-up thing. Making things a public utility. It's like, well, you're advocating for like the EU model, which I think is partially good, but it's also somewhat an authoritarian version of this stuff, and that's very dangerous. I don't want the EU regulating speech to the degree that they are, and I don't trust it. And it's like, well, okay. No, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at, those sorts of things. So it's like, anyway, but these are complex. I'm fading because I've gone too long. I'm going to go. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I'm sorry I'm a little bit rushed and stuff, but I've got to piss again. Usual thing. But I will, I'm trying to recalibrate and decide whether I want to do sort of like, I'm just trying to decide what the way forward is, whether I do sort of segments, whether I cover multiple things in one stream and start shortening what I want to talk about. But then I just end up being like everyone else. I think I can just be me and but anyway, I'm just thinking, because I am also going to be selling the courses soon. So that should be, you're going to see a more cohesive strategy and bunch of content coming down the pipe. I'm just stretched a bit thin as always, and so if you want to become a patron, that would be very wonderful. Obviously everyone's hurting at the moment, so it's always appreciated and absolutely never expected, but the more that people can support me, however, one thing that is that people support these guys, but they're millionaires, they don't give a shit. They don't need your help. And it's like, I do. And so what I tend to do is I tend to financially support channels that need the money, and then I tend to end my patronage as soon as they don't. I'd like to provide that, but that's also because I can't possibly consume all of the content that they're offering. There's only I think there's only three that I subscribe to, like no matter what, and that's Doug Stanhope, Ben Folds, and R.M. Brown, and I'm a patron of them. But I most of the time my support of a channel tends to I tend to wait until they've sort of reached a certain thing, and then I like move on to someone else, and I think that's a good thing. But try to it would be nice if you could become a patron. But I do have the courses coming. That's one way that you can help me, is to like get people signed up to this course. There's going to be many of them coming. This is just the first one. Deciding what the first one is difficult, because that's when you start to, you need to position yourself as a, an expert in this thing, when I'm an expert in quite a few things and I want to talk about quite a few things. Course got too massive, so I'm breaking it into smaller sort of, 2 to 3 hour, self-taught kind of things. Got to record all of the stuff for that this week. But it's basically, like I said, it's about the earned media approach of, and the consequences, and how, like it's for marketers and stuff, about like not doing the Mac versus PC thing, not polarizing people, because there are the impacts. So it's a little bit of information about, the research and the stats and the impact and the political impact, but also using case studies. So there's some recent examples, like the Oxfam example recently, fucking around. Don't fuck around. I want to call it like fuck around and find out, but obviously I can't do that for a corporate audience. But it's basically that, which is, don't play these games. They're very serious. You've got to try and be smarter. This is how you can be better. You can do better. You can, you don't have to do it this way. Try to rise above it. And also, if you're going to fuck around with it, then, there's consequences to that. And you need to, I'm just going to bring some of this stuff. Like the Bud Light example is a good one, where, these fuck sticks, you can't control whether they're going to do that, but you cannot actively goad the consequences are too serious at this point to be playing around with culture war shit. So I'm going to provide that educational content for marketers. So it's about $140 for a course and per person, and there's a discount for a group or whatever. And obviously, if you want me to teach in person or anything like that, then that costs more because But I cover my flights and pay me a bit, and I'll go wherever and teach teach whoever about this, because I actually feel strongly about that. But it's like not fuck around and find out, which is you want to play with these games, and it's not benign. The impact is not benign. So what I'm hoping to do is at least reach some brand teams and advertisers and agencies and even individual marketers and influencers about how, it's cool. It's not just about engagement. It's not just about the numbers anymore, but you do actually need to understand, first of all, the very real risks, like the corporate. So, you obviously when you're selling to businesses or corporations, you've got to sell them on like risks and make, certain behavior has risks attached. Some of them don't know, like Bud Light, like that was just a boneheaded fucking move. And we're seeing that over and over again. But now I've got some good case studies. I can sort of build that out, but I'm just gonna. That's the first course. That's the first cab off the rank, and it's basically just the lead for consulting and stuff, which is more expensive. But I want to travel. I want to do things. I want to see the world. I'm happy to speak on it, and it will obviously be better than this. And but I'm more than happy to talk on that for now, which is but I do need to monetize something fast. Cost of living and everything is just killing us. So I need to find ways of earning money. So I would very much appreciate your support in any way that can occur. But I very much appreciate everyone who has stuck with me all these years. Like most of the patrons that I've got have actually been with me since I first decided to start doing this, and they've stuck around no matter what. And I've been disorganized, and I still want to write the book, but I don't like my chances. But they've stuck around, they've been patient with me, and I appreciate it. Most of them have been sticking around since I stopped being able to reach an audience. Like it was, it's just been sort of standing still for some time. Gosh, I occasionally get new patrons, and I very much appreciate that. But for the most part, I haven't really been growing. I've been standing still, and if not for a handful of very generous patrons who are at a higher tier, I wouldn't. It would. Yeah, that honestly, that money makes a big difference. Like it it helps me hang on. Like, you know, I wish I had more cash flow and better cash flow, but it's just one of those things where I haven't really had a product because my work has been sort of, you know, I've just been spinning my wheels, as you know. So I very much appreciate your support. It's never taken for granted. And even, you know, even if you can't support me and you like me and stuff, you know, I think it's worth saying that I do appreciate people who watch me. I don't engage with comments because I just don't have the time, and also because it's the odds of them being negative are much higher than any potential payoff. This is another part of this is a different course. This is the responsible influence course around setting boundaries as a creator. But, you know, the odds are that it's going to be negative. But a lot of people make the trade-off that they expect that they're going to receive like 100 negative comments, and they go looking for that one positive one, and they somehow make that, but it affects, you know, like it's not worth that one positive comment with all the fucking negative shit that you get. And so I take the opposite approach, which is that it's like, well, if you really love me, then you will sign up and you will do stuff and you will engage with me, but I'm not going to read comments that are largely negative. It's not that I can't handle it. It's just that it's just not worth it. It's just, I don't need that shit. And so, you know, if you're nice to me and you want to try and get in contact with me, then you can do that. That's great. There's plenty of ways to do that. But I think giving people permission to say that they don't have to receive these things, they don't have to receive abuse, I don't have to be like mansplained. As you know, I just use it as a general term because it's a distinct set of behaviours. It's not man talking, it's mansplained. But I don't have to put up with it, right? And I think that that's the thing is there's this implicit assumption with a lot of these, all of these norms that we just accept as putting ourselves out there on the internet, that people have the right to behave that way. They don't. And so I'm trying to do that as an example. Now, look, whether it affects my growth, of course it does, okay? The fact that I'm not willing to engage in fucking drama and read the comments and, you know, like obviously Twitter, a big part of Twitter Blue and being able to monetize is going in and replying and reading your replies, but I don't want to be like fighting for cash. Like it's just another version. It's like, no, I want to I want to like model better behaviors, right? And so I've sat there with a frozen screen for the whole time. Sorry about that. Just realized. But, you know, I've you don't need to do that. You don't have to. Okay. And that's the thing, is that you don't actually have to do that stuff. And this is one of those things where it's like, it's like much like with workers' rights and stuff like that. You know, you don't have to be accepting abuse just because you are being paid by an employer. Like there's rules and expectations around how people treat you. And I feel the same way about anyone who comes in and like tries to fuck up my streams or is annoying or especially is annoying to my audience that pays me. And again, it's not that it's not that I only care about money, because I will just let you in if you're not an idiot. It's a fuckwit wall, but at the same time, like people who are willing to put money down are usually people who are more invested, and they're my priority. And like, it's not like, I'm sorry, but like people need to get their heads out of their asses and thinking that socialism equals free shit and doing stuff for free. It's like, no, I'm a socialist because I own my own labor and I set my price and this is my price, right? That's socialism. Is that I live my values again. I don't sit and put up with your shit. Do you know what capitalism is? Dangling cash in front of people and treating them like shit and telling other people what they're expected to tolerate. And that's ultimately landlord mindset is exploitation. And if you're just showing up and you think that eyeballs is enough of a cost of admission for you to like be rude or disrespectful, then I'm afraid you're not a socialist. Socialists value labor and socialists pay for labor, and socialists respect the time and effort that people put into things. They don't just show up and make demands because they've given a token sum. That's not how it works. That's not lefty. You ain't lefty if you're doing that. So there you go. There's my socialist argument for supporting people, okay? Which is that, you pay for shit because the effort's there. So anyway, I love you. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your fucking precious life seconds. I thank you, Taya, for your precious life seconds that you put in for years and years and years and years. But anyway, thank you. Take care. I will be back probably Wednesday. Thursday. Depends. I got like law quizzes due this week. So anyway, but I'm working on some stuff, but I'll be back soon. Anyway, I love you. Take care. Do do do. Oh no, that's the old song. Yeah. Anyway, I got to fix the microphone so I can sing over the fucking credits and stuff too. 'Cause that was funny. Do do do. All right. Love you. Bye.